Chapter 1556. A barrier that perfectly separated the void from the outside and froze. It only existed in theory. Its existence perfectly functioned as it should in reality. Its function was reduced to a wall that was a little stronger than an ordinary city gate, and its weak stagnation effect made the effects of time insignificant. Perhaps some things inside were preserved well, and perhaps there was still wreckage from the end of the war still smoking inside. It was quite easy to break through this barrier. All one needed to do was to point the nether void sword and poke it with weak origin energy to restore the chaotic order, rules, void, and nothingness here to their normal state. The stagnation inside would also end, and it would return to its normal state of being washed away by time. In fact, it could be done more crudely, such as crashing into it, but that might cause the barrier to collapse. After all, it was something that existed in theory. Although it had been reduced to such a terrible state in reality, it was still more special than a normal barrier that had such a function. It's not difficult to break through, but I'm afraid that something inside will end the semi-stagnation. We have to be quick. If we're lucky, we might be able to catch up with the cool down of the battlefield. Yin Nuashing took out the nether void sword and gently poked the tip of the sword a few times on the barrier. She aimed at a spot and stabbed it. Several origin energies flashed on her body and surged into the barrier through the nether void sword. The barrier quickly became illusory and flashed like lightning. The energy and destruction beyond the barrier's capacity to handle caused it to shake. The vortex around it twisted even more, and the starlight collapsed as if a black hole was slowly awakening inside. It's quite sturdy. As expected of a theoretical barrier, it's a little special. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself as he twirled the nether void sword in his hand. A few more types of origin energy gushed out, creating a river of energy within the barrier. Then, the barrier, which was twisting even more intensely, suddenly shuddered and dimmed as if it was about to run out of energy. It flickered, and after a few flashes, the distorted scene around it gradually returned to normal. The spinning nether void sword drew an arc and completely tore the barrier apart. The scene before them returned to normal after a violent flash. The sunken and distorted space returned to normal. The spirals and vortexes of light stabilized, and an aura of destruction of order and rules drifted out from the broken barrier. Yin Nuashing frowned and fearlessly stepped forward into the area that was suspended by the void. In this place, the state of war might have just ended not too long ago. Space had yet to recover from the impact of excessive destructive energy. Order and rules might not have begun to recover. I don't feel any abnormality in the flow of time. So you could not help but say after a short while, there was no abnormality in the flow of time in the first place. After all, this barrier has not really reached the level where it can block the normal flow of time inside and outside. The flow of time inside still follows the rules of time of this world. It's just that the stagnation has made everything inside less sensitive to time. As for the rules of time of this strange, starry sky, Yin Nuashing pursed her lips and tugged at her long hair. It's not easy to find out what the rules of time of this starry sky are like when you're in this space. At least for now, I don't feel any signs of it being forcefully twisted. That is to say, the flow of time in this place is still normal. However, even if there is any phenomenon of time slowing outside, it has been washed away by our intrusion. Now, there's only normal time here. Walking into this place, the short-haired man struggled to find something familiar. Yin Nuashing cautiously approached it, and his soul spread out in the starry sky. As he had just broken free from the stagnation, he felt a high energy reaction from dozens of places. However, they were all residual energy sources, traces of battle, and traces of the void and space quietly recovering. At present, there was no danger. Judging from a scale of the war ruins, the battle back then should be comparable to, well, actually, it doesn't have to be comparable. To be able to use a weapon of the scale of the Yuanshi realm stone statue, it must have been a great battle that happened 11 years ago. Yin Nuashing said with a grimace. In fact, when he saw the Yuanshi realm stone statue, He had already thought about it. There was no such thing in the Dark Age. Other than that era, which era had such a weapon of war? What followed was a pain in the ass. In fact, from the beginning, he felt that something was wrong with the war ruins. However, he did not expect it to be related to the mythological era. Wait a minute, could this be related to that again? Shaking his head to throw those terrible thoughts out of his mind, Yun Nuoxing said as he walked forward. Judging from the scale of the battle back then, and with the stagnation effect of the barrier, it is normal that there are high energy reactions here. These are all traces of battle. The planet that the short-haired man was familiar with still had an atmosphere. The stars around it were already dead, or it did not orbit a sun. Even though there was no sun nearby, Yun Nuoxing still found signs of light. He could see clearly what the interior of the planet looked like. A scorched earth burned by the flames of war, a huge crater that was smashed by a great force, occupying the entire surface of the planet. Deeper into the crater, he could even see its core. A normal planet with such damage would have been torn apart. It seemed that this planet was also specially made. However, there was not much energy left in its body. Perhaps it had already run out of energy when the war broke out. Now, it was just a huge hard sphere. Landing on this sunken planet from the starry sky, the divine soul that had spread out retracted from wandering in the starry sky back to the planet. Yun Nuoxing looked up at the starry sky that was covered with a layer of fog. I don't feel anything, but makes sense. The battle has been over for so long. Other than some traces of destruction that have yet to dissipate due to stagnation, there shouldn't be anything here. Apart from the crater at the end of the horizon, there was only destruction caused by the aftermath of the energy. Ashes, flames, smoke, these things had not dissipated in time. There was no trace of life left on the dry land, no matter if it was alive or dead. Yun Nuoxing could not help but frown. It had been like this since he came to this starry sky. First of all, his soul could not go very far. Secondly, there was the problem of interference. There was still a lot of energy in this space. The interference was too severe. Otherwise, he would not have to land on the planet to check it out. He could not help it. He could not see clearly if he did not get closer. Yun Nuoxing suddenly thought of an important problem. He looked for Feng Qing Wang in his soul. Girl, can you see if there is anything alive in this space? Without hesitation, Feng Qing Wang shook her head. She had been using his senses to sense the space when she came in. She did not find anything. There is a lot of energy. Well, just like you, little star, I am also affected. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. A battle that lasted 11 eras was bound to involve primeval stage cultivators. Who knew what kind of terrible destruction these war ruins had suffered? Perhaps the high-energy reactions they sensed were actually remnants of primeval stage cultivators' power. It was perfectly normal for their senses to be disturbed. After all, he was only a mere Empyrean god of origin. However, even if their souls were useless, it did not prevent them from using their eyes. With his strange physique, even if there were no ghosts in this place, he would definitely be able to find something. Moreover, he felt that there should be something in this place. Based on the fact that the barrier was still there when they came, he was certain that there must be something here. It was just that God knew what it was. That kind of slightly stubborn idea was a little shaken after he wandered around the planet for a long time. As the stagnation was lifted and time passed, the destruction and traces left behind also weakened little by little. The gaze that swept across the planet also gradually became bored and stopped. Yun Nuoxing casually stopped at a place and could not help but say to himself, "This is great. My physique also has a time when it fails." Jing Yuanji could not help but smile bitterly. They had been walking around for 2 hours. Other than seeing the remnant traces of destruction weaken little by little, they did not find anything. Nothing happened. It was a little bit of a malfunction. It's boring. After stopping for about 5 minutes, Yun Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief. He thought that there was nothing in this strange starfield that was sealed off. When he turned around and was about to go somewhere else, he suddenly saw the stars in the distance distorting before him. There was a layer of transparent, wave-like thing wriggling in the starry sky from two ends towards the middle. The energy barrier that was severed and stagnant slowly closed from the edges, sealing the starfield bit by bit. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. Everyone was also shocked by this sudden scene. Before they could react, all the high-energy reactions around them stopped showing signs of fading away. The flames were still burning, but they would not consume anything. The restored void was fixed at the scene where the opening had not closed, but nothing would disappear from the void crack. The starry sky once again fell into a state of stagnation. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. Everyone was stunned by this sudden scene. Everyone was stunned. The barrier is closed. The voice of the little angel rang in his mind. Yin Nuoxing slowly took a breath, his expression a little stiff. The stagnation effect had appeared in this starfield again. All the energy reactions around him had shown that this effect had appeared. He also felt that the energy reaction in his body was a little strange. It was a little restless, but he could still suppress it. Was this the case when the barrier's effect was reflected on living things? I can't find the source of the energy, Min replied in a low voice. Yin Nuoxing was silent. Although that was the case, there was definitely something that still existed here. It might even be a living person. Such a complicated thing that existed only in theory should not be able to self-repair with just a core, just like his large group of magic circles. But what if it was not? Bang! A dull energy explosion sounded in the distant starry sky, causing the silent group to turn their eyes abruptly to look into the distance. The scene of a burst of energy appeared in the distant starry sky. The destructive power caused the sound to reach his ears indiscriminately. The place where the huge burst of energy exploded was far away. It might be the sound of a huge scene being blown up. The tremor of the destructive energy shook the starry sky. A battle scene? Yin Nuoxing did not say anything and rushed toward the place where the burst of energy was shooting into the sky. Ripples appeared in the space around him. Those were the movements left behind by magic circles that were set up in the void. His eyes flickered as he looked at the burst of energy that was still expanding. It was impossible for mere residual energy to cause such a commotion in a stagnant scene. Was it a living being? Was it a fourth-rank creation? Or was it some kind of strange thing? Master Feng, be careful, Jing Yuanji reminded him softly. Yin Nuoxing nodded. In this place that was very likely to be a battlefield left behind from the mythological era, he needed to be vigilant of the primordial heavenly god spirit. They had already gone deep into a rather dangerous place. It was not impossible for them to die here if they were not careful. The starry sky flowed quickly around him. It did not take long for Yin Nuoxing to approach the place where the energy was shining. However, the strange thing was that they did not see anything there. The fiery red energy burst expanded to the size of a star and then slowly dissipated. If it were not for the fact that he could determine that there was a huge amount of for-life rule power in it, he would have thought that it was just a sun that had exploded. There's nothing. Yin Nuoxing was really stunned this time. He ran over from across the starry sky, but in the end, he did not see anything. Instead, a burst of energy slowly dissipated before his eyes. This was a joke, Bang. An energy roar that was enough to shake the void suddenly erupted less than 100 kilometers in front of them. Their vision, which was originally dim and they could barely see their surroundings, was instantly illuminated as if it was daytime. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. A burst of energy with a massive amount of destructive energy and void power was rapidly expanding in front of them. A mere 100 kilometers was covered in it in an instant. He had just reacted to put on a layer of energy shield when he was swallowed by the expanding energy burst. The energy's destructive impact was very powerful. It was at the peak of origin level. Fortunately, he was prepared. Otherwise, even if he was caught off guard by this energy, he would still be covered in dust. He would not be injured, but at most, he would be in a sorry state. After identifying the direction where the energy was expanding, Yin Nuoxing was about to escape the range of the energy explosion in one go. However, the origin energy in his body suddenly lit up at this moment. Both he and his little angel were stunned. He gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to ignore this sudden movement and escape, The dozens of origin energy hidden in his body suddenly circulated on their own. His body that was about to turn around and run suddenly stiffened. A second later, it dragged his body toward the center of the energy explosion. Huh, what are you playing this time? The little angel was completely calm. She even had the mood to tease him. Although it's late, it's here. Like going against the flow of a waterfall, the origin energy pushed all the destructive energy to the side. In a few seconds, it came to the center of the energy explosion. In the place covered by the light, there was a jagged crack that was 10 feet wide. The endless destructive energy was gushing out from that place like a flood. Space crack? Space. Wait a minute. Could it be that the things that I'm looking for, the things in this space, are all hidden in other layers of space? Yin Nuoxing only had time to murmur. The origin energy tied a chain around his hand like a ferocious beast and pulled him into the space crack. He had to desperately hold Frost in his arms to prevent himself from disappearing. After a short and trembling space transition, Yin Nuoxing clearly felt that he had gone to a deeper space. However, there were many rules that were almost similar to the space just now, except that the edges and corners were different. He rushed out from the center of another energy explosion and quickly passed through another energy explosion's light ball. Little star, the breath of life. I feel it. Destructive energy. The threat level is very high. Be careful. Min also reminded in a deep voice. Yin Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was already very careful, but the situation now was that he couldn't remember what he remembered. It was as if they were being dragged from one dimension to another by the origin energy. Furthermore, the urgency of the situation made him recall the time when he was tormented by more than 100 origin energy essences. If it weren't for the fact that the situation wasn't right, he would have cursed out loud right now. His divine soul hurriedly fused into the void and began to spread in all directions. He began to pray that this space would not be disturbed by so much energy. After a while, a group of people who seemed to be humans appeared in his senses. One group of people was wearing pale white robes, and the other group was wrapped in black robes with hoods on their heads. They looked like a cult on a certain planet in a certain world. They were just short of carrying 2 torches to enforce the law. The group of people in the pale white robes was very different from the other group in terms of quality and quantity. Their attack methods were no different from what he knew. The primeval heavenly gods had fallen to the point of fighting each other in close quarters, and it was obvious that hand-to-hand combat was a common method across the void. The other was only energy attack methods, and if he wanted to change it again, he would at most combine the two. However, those people in black robes didn't look right. Chaos, no order, no rationality, or at least a considerable part of their rationality had been fed to the dogs. Why was their presence so similar to the abyssal death mist spawn and the distorted race? When the two were put together and multiplied by 3, it would almost become the former. If there was anything else, it was only a feeling, unusually dangerous. This was the most straightforward feeling that was transmitted to him by both his soul and the origin energy. And this danger did not seem to be referring to the abnormality of any one of them, but that they were abnormal. He threw this small problem aside and did not have time to care about it. More importantly, he was almost out of the place where the energy burst out, and in 5 seconds at most, he would be exposed to the scene of the battle. There was obviously a problem with the origin energy pulling him here, and he could not figure it out for a while. There must be one side in the scene that would become the tour guide, but he could not tell which side it was. He quickly yelled in his soul, "Which side?" "The black one. The one that doesn't look like a good guy. That one. Hit him. Hit the mother asterisk her." Their opinions were unusually united, and Yin Nuoxing did not intend to hesitate after hearing this. His soul merged with the little angel, and his body turned silver white in less than a second. Magic circles that had already accumulated energy to blast through the void were waiting for the opportunity to move, and with the help of the origin energy, he leaped out of the explosion of light. "Give me the pull of all things." Min could not help but spit out a mouthful of water. Why is it still the same move? Chapter 1557. There were two groups of people fighting in the starry sky. One of them looked like a proper life form of order from the front. They were righteous, brave, and fearless. They all had the body shape of a human. They did not have crooked mouths, slanted faces, or any other strange growth limbs. They looked like normal humans. As for the other side, they were wrapped in black cloaks. They did not look too different from humans in terms of appearance. The only way to find the difference was from the aura and energy they exuded. Damn it, there were 12. 8 million non-order life forms. Just their aura and the degree of non-order was almost comparable to the primogenitor of the distorted race. All right, those 8 big guys are still working at the void front lines. When the leader in white heard this, his face turned gloomy and perplexed. In such a tense battle, it was really a headache for him to hear such words that he had no idea what the other side was up to, especially when he had to passively waste a part of his brain power to think about it. That was even more ridiculous. Shaking his head, he tossed the words that he had just shouted out in that strange language to the back of his mind. The leader used a furious blow to push back a few enemies that were closing in on him. He then turned around and shouted to his own people, "Maintain the defensive formation." The combat team was on guard against the enemies that were charging through the barrier. "Hold on a little longer. Our reinforcements will be here soon." Several of the black-cloaked figures who were repelled by him sprayed out black mist-like energy from behind them to stop their figures from flying backward. They tilted their heads and exchanged glances with the others. In an instant, they waved the weapons in their hands and swarmed forward, all of them attacking the leader. TSK. Annoying trash. The leader of the pale white side glared at the enemies charging at him. After hesitating for a moment, he still chose to retreat. Those few sneak attacks instantly struck the energy barrier that suddenly appeared in front of him. The members of the combat team behind him flickered and blasted the energy that they had been accumulating for a long time at the enemy's face. The powerful energy blasted all of the enemies into the starry sky. A dazzling ball of energy appeared in the distant starry sky and rapidly expanded. The leader looked at the panting faces of the combat team with a ferocious expression. This kind of attack could not be used continuously. With such a huge difference in numbers, if it was not for the enemy being afraid of the power that erupted when they were dying, the battle would have ended long ago. He also understood the enemy's intention. If he made good use of this point, he might be able to take away a few people today. The black-cloaked figures who were attacking from other directions poured their fierce attacks on the energy barrier. Layers of ripples immediately appeared on the barrier where the attacks were concentrated. The leader was mobilizing his people to go forward to defend when suddenly a huge amount of energy surged out from behind him. A power that was enough to penetrate the barrier in one blow suddenly appeared, all of them rushing toward him, ready to break this weak point in one blow. This made his heart tremble for a moment. He instinctively reacted by gathering all of his energy to support the energy barrier. Several black-cloaked figures wrapped in a huge amount of energy appeared from the light of the energy explosion. Just as the black-cloaked figures were about to press on the energy barrier with the shining black energy in their hands, they suddenly disappeared. Hit me with 10,000 mammoths attraction. 10,000 mammoths attraction void. Chaos, falling stars. The fierce roar resounded throughout this star field. A dark red energy suddenly lit up with a dazzling light from the side. The next moment, all of the energy in this star field surged toward the place where the light burst out as if it was being devoured by a black hole. Then, a huge energy nova suddenly erupted, pressing half of the black-cloaked figures into the explosion of energy. The two sides who were fiercely fighting were stunned by this scene at the same time. Just as they turned their heads and did not have time to react, the dark red energy nova suddenly collapsed. It was as if the void had collapsed and a destructive energy shock wave swept over from afar. The shock wave, with the endless destructive power of the shock wave, pressed the people on both sides to the ground. The difference was that the black-cloaked figures disappeared with a somersault, while the pale white group was blown to the ground by a gust of wind. The leader crossed his arms before him. The energy was not targeted at them, so it was not very harmful to them. However, just the shock waves of the energy were enough to knock them over. He was forced to use all of his remaining energy to defend himself. As he defended himself, he stared at the shocking light from the dark red energy. This energy is the third party who had suddenly appeared to interfere with the battle had immediately broken up the stalemate. The black-cloaked figures had all been thrown far away by the shock waves of the energy nova. There were a large number of casualties, but not all of them had died. Their opponent was at the peak of reciprocity just like them, so it was impossible for them to die so easily. The leader of the black-cloaked figures calmed down very quickly from the chaos. His scarlet eyes stared fixedly at Yun Nuoxing under the shadow of his cloak. His gaze was rather surprised and doubtful. He could sense a bad feeling from the person who had suddenly appeared. After weighing the pros and cons, he waved his hand and actually wanted to leave with his people. The pale-faced leader's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He yelled at Yun Nuoxing, who had appeared out of nowhere, "Friend, stop them. You can't let them leave." Yun Nuoxing was stunned by the deafening yell. He didn't really understand. What kind of language was this guy speaking? He was shocked. There was actually a language in the void that he did not understand. What is this guy saying? Yun Nuoxing scratched his head and mumbled. However, he soon discovered that the black-cloaked figures were about to flee. He could not help but grin. You have to remove the roots when you're cutting weeds. Who knows what kind of trouble they'll cause if they leave? This thought flashed through his mind, and his figure flashed away as well. What? You want to leave? A voice that sounded like a cat toying with a mouse rang out in the minds of the black-cloaked figures and the others. The surrounding space was suddenly sealed by a complex energy that was difficult to decipher. A figure flashed out right in front of them. It was the unknown person who had caused them to feel lingering fear. However, what confused them was, what did this guy just say? The leader of the black-cloaked figures stared at Yun Nuoxing. As if he knew that it would not be easy to leave this time, he immediately waved his hand and led everyone to swarm forward. They surrounded Yun Nuoxing from all directions. The energy that was not of order was so powerful that Yun Nuoxing found it rather ridiculous. It caused the space and the void to tremble. Buzz! The netherworld ruins sword that appeared out of thin air was brimming with energy. Yun Nuoxing grabbed it in his hand and swept it forward fiercely. A wave of energy appeared out of thin air and slammed into the group of black-cloaked figures, interrupting their charge and breaking up their formation. His figure flickered and appeared in front of the leader like a ghost. He punched the leader in the face and sent his upper body flying backward into the void. 1,000-meter-long spatial rift appeared in the starry sky. The void and void energy along the way exploded, and the energy was in a mess. His fleeting figure disappeared once again. Yun Nuoxing rushed in front of the leader, clenched his hand into a claw, and pressed it toward the leader's head. If this claw landed directly, a dazzling scene of energy would bloom on the spot. However, the black-cloaked figures seemed to know what Yun Nuoxing was planning to do. After breaking free from the wave, they all rushed toward their leader. When they were about 1,000 feet away, Yun Nuoxing appeared. Yun Nuoxing was a little stunned when he saw this predictive action. When he reacted, he grabbed the Netherworld Ruins sword with both hands and stabbed it into the void in front of him. Silver-white energy madly gathered around him, and then suddenly exploded. Scram! A ring of silver-white energy suddenly exploded from Yun Nuoxing's body. An unprecedented amount of order energy swept out like a void storm, and the dense origin energy instantly bombarded all the black-cloaked figures. They didn't even have time to be surprised before they were directly pressed into the void. The abnormal non-order energy on their bodies was almost annihilated by the dense origin energy of order. A few of them didn't even have time to activate their instinctive defenses before they turned into a rain of energy in the starry sky and dissipated into the origin energy storm. It wasn't easy for the black-cloaked leader to retrieve his upper body from the void, but before he could see what the real world looked like, he was pressed into the void by a violent energy that seemed to annihilate the void. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and the energy in his body dissipated. His divine soul was severely injured. After being tossed into the void like a piece of trash by the power of the void origin order, the captain was tortured by the mixed power of the void for quite some time. Just as he was about to forcefully gather his energy to break free from his predicament, a fair and slender hand pierced through the void and grabbed him by the neck, pulling him out of the void and lifting him up high in the sky. The origin energy surged wildly into his body from the fair hand, causing a large number of cracks to appear on his body that was already on the verge of collapsing. Seeing that he was about to die, the leader hurriedly opened his mouth and roared in horror. His voice, however, shocked Yin Nuashing. It was another language she had never heard before, and it seemed to be very different from the language spoken by the group of people just now. However, the defeated general could only say a few words at this time, so it didn't make much of a difference whether he listened or not. Yin Nuashing grinned, and the origin energy in her hand surged out wildly. The excessive origin energy burst out of the black-cloaked leader's body, and when he reached the limit of what he could endure, he immediately exploded into a white light. The boundless power of order, accompanied by the origin energy mixed with the downpour of the fallen peak Empyrean god of origin, creating a rather dazzling scene in the starry sky. The energy light rain that ignored the starry sky swirled and fell in all directions, mixed with the silver-white energy cyclones formed by the origin energy. The aura of non-order on them was completely gone. Yin Nuashing glanced at it and quickly opened a crack in the space beside him, opening a space filled with origin energy and boundless power of order and laws. He reached in and took out Frost, who had just been put in there not long ago. After carefully inspecting her, he breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that the effect is not too great, but it's definitely not good to leave her in there for a long time. The group of people in pale, white robes who had rushed over from behind only managed to make it to the end of the dazzling energy rain. When they saw the dazzling scene, they could not help but feel a little shocked. The leader quickly came in front of Yin Nuashing and solemnly clasped his hands at him. Yin Nuashing blinked and tilted his head. The leader was also very confused when he saw that he was completely confused. After thinking for a while, he seemed to have understood something and showed an expression of realization. He opened his mouth again and said, "Thank you again for your help, friend. I didn't expect to be able to wait for reinforcements in this godforsaken place." Yin Nuashing's eyes widened, and his heart thumped violently. Even his breathing was a little rapid. This time, he understood word for word. The leader had changed his language. That was the language of the mythological era. The leader was also stunned when he saw that Yin Nuashing was so shocked that his mouth was wide open. Just now, he was confused because he did not understand. Now, he seemed to understand, but he was also a little confused. This made him feel a little troubled. In the past, he had never had to worry about not being able to understand a language. It did not seem right to use telepathy to communicate, so he changed his language. "Air, do you have any questions?" Yin Nuashing was stunned again. This time, he used the common language of all races. However, it sounded a little stiff. It seemed that the leader was not used to speaking this language. He looked at the leader in silence for a while, then slowly said, "Why do you know this language?" He used the language of Kanzaki, so the leader understood what Yin Nuashing meant. However, he did not quite understand. He scratched his head in confusion and said, "Well, I do. Is there a problem?" Without waiting for this topic to continue, he waved his hand and said, "Friend, this is not the place to talk. You seem to have some questions. We can leave this place first and talk slowly. There's no rush." Yin Nuashing nodded and said, "Okay." Half a minute had passed by the time the group of people in pale clothes had finished packing up. The leader found the right direction and led the way forward. Yin Nuashing followed closely behind him. His gaze swept across them from time to time. His doubts were washed away by the waves in his mind. He was very curious about what kind of lousy thing had triggered this time. They could speak the language of the mythological era. Could it be that they were really the group of people who had survived from the mythological era? This group of people who still lived in the ruins of the war and did not completely die in the war? Ridiculous. This was the word that kept circling around in his mind. If his guess was true, then it was really outrageous. You look very confused. The leader could not help but speak at this time. He saw that Yun Nuoxing's face was full of confusion and said, "May I know which side sent you to help?" "Me?" Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. From the only words he knew, it seemed that this sealed galaxy was complicated beyond his imagination. He shook his head and said, "I'm just passing by. I'm not sent by any side. Let's not talk about this first. The language you just spoke, is it something you were born with?" The leader scratched his head and looked puzzled. "More or less. What's wrong?" No. Yun Nuoxing's eyes flickered. It seemed that his guess was right, but he did not know why such a strange thing would happen. Furthermore, he felt that the question just now must have been very stupid in the eyes of others. It was as stupid as catching a native of a strange planet and asking him why he could speak their language. Other than saying that he could speak it all along, did he have to start from the beginning of the world? Yun Nuoxing and the group of people in his soul had serious expressions. Only the heavens knew what had happened in the depths of these war ruins. Originally, he had only guessed that this place was related to the era 11 years ago. This guess hadn't taken root in his mind for long, and now, a group of people who could speak the language of the gods had appeared to confirm his guess. This was too fast. That's right. The leader did not speak the language of the gods or the common language of all races. It was another language that he was more familiar with. It should be one of the mother tongues. Based on his understanding of the mythological era, excluding the common language of all races and the language of the gods, there was only one language left, the first divine language, also known as the first divine language. Just like the language of the gods, with a little power of the rules, one's words would follow the law. If it was really that language, Howard did not know much about it, but he could give a try. He could at least recite a sentence or two. Yun Nuoxing coughed twice to clear his throat, and then said, This isn't a good place." The leader was stunned for a moment and responded in the language of the gods. "Do you have something urgent to deal with here? If not, I suggest that we leave this place and return to our territory first. It's safer there. After all, we didn't expect that group of people to wander to this place. It seems that something big is going to happen soon." Yun Nuoxing was speechless. God knows what I said. As there were still a lot of doubts and uncertainties, Yun Nuoxing could not ask casually. He could only suppress the questions that would easily expose him and focus on the starry sky instead. He analyzed, and sorted out a lot of information. There was no fourth order. This was a starry sky of normal order. Looking up, he could vaguely see the barrier that he had torn apart just now. It was still flashing there at this moment, and this space was actually not as small as what they had seen on the surface. Perhaps it was because they had entered a spatial layer switch, but he could feel that the size of this starry sky was no less than the size of the light orbs of the four worlds piled up together. He had not seen anything further yet, so he decided not to talk about it for the time being. Moreover, there was a very strong life aura here. Speaking of the life here, he had thought that the lost ones that had been passed down from the mythological era would be different. However, their aura and energy seemed to have changed along with the changes in the general situation of the void. They did not carry the ancient aura of that past era, and he did not sense the aura of origin energy. Although this place might be related to the mythological era, it might not necessarily be related to the heavenly god of origin and the others. This made Yun Nuoxing breathe a sigh of relief. He could accept it if it was related to the mythological era, but if it was related to the great heavenly god of origin, he had a feeling that he would die at any moment. By the way, did the barrier in the starry sky flash just now? I don't know if I was seeing things. Yun Nuoxing thought of this and planned to get some information out of the leader. Upon hearing this, the leader nodded. "Since you've said so, it means that what we saw just now wasn't an illusion. There should be a little problem with the barrier that separates us from the outside world. Fortunately, the person in charge quickly fixed it. Otherwise, the power that is different from order and non-order would probably have seeped in." Yun Nuoxing made no sound. He was probably talking about fourth-rank power. Perhaps it was because of this barrier that they were not infected with the aura of fourth-rank power. At the moment, they seemed to be fine. By the way, this might also be the reason why they had been here since the war site was formed, including those enemies who possessed non-order power. Perhaps the war back then had not ended at all, and it was still going on and fighting to this day. The little angel suddenly sighed. The mythological era that has passed away. It's just that I don't know how deep we can go this time and how much we can understand. For the Dark Age, the mythological era has disappeared too completely. It's difficult to see through it. Yin was silent, disappeared completely. However, if one were to talk about the traces that belong to the mythological era, the divine realm, the underworld, the distorted tribe, and this war site, all of them had traces of that era. Although he always liked to say that the mythological era had completely disappeared, some things still existed. However, there are some things that still existed, never disappearing to the extent where they would continue to exist. Chapter 1558. Time had shackled this world with a layer of shackles. Along with its memories and existence, it was thrown into the void and sealed forever. 11 eras had passed, and this world had never changed. It shrunk alone in a corner of the void, releasing an eternal dim light in solitude, repeating the cycle of its own world, destruction, and rebirth. If there were no changes, perhaps no one would touch this tiny light even if time continued to flow, until an uninvited guest suddenly appeared. You came from the outside world? When Yin decided to tell the truth this time, it gave this group of people a fright. It was a big fright. Their reaction was so big that they almost jumped into the void. The leader was slightly calmer than the others, but only by a little. His face was still filled with unconcealable shock and astonishment. Actually, you should be able to guess it first. Yin shrugged helplessly in response. There were many topics and many things that could not be said as a life form in the same world, so he had no choice but to reveal his identity. The identity of a lost person who accidentally slipped into this world because the cracks suddenly opened. Anyway, there was no one else here. He could just make up a story, and no one would be able to expose him. Initially, the leader was a little doubtful and did not believe him. But after hearing what he said, he recalled how Yin expressed that he did not understand at all when they first met. Coupled with the fact that he kept asking questions about that language, and the fact that he muttered something that even he did not understand, he more or less believed Yin. Outside? How is it outside? Although he was still skeptical, the leader could not help but ask the question that everyone in this world was concerned about. The expression on his face was mixed with struggle and anticipation. They had been here for a very, very long time, so long that it was almost eternal. The world they knew, everything they knew, had already passed with time to the distant back. They were even numb and no longer looked forward to the day when they would be free. But when they heard that Yin came from the outside world, hope was ignited in them in an instant. Yin opened his mouth and was silent for a while. Under the sincere and slightly crazy expectant gaze of the leader and the others, he finally said softly, "Time has passed for 11 eras. It is now the middle of the 51st era. The void that you are in has completely changed." The leader and the others were stunned. The little bit of hope that they had was completely shattered. Yin sighed in his heart. He thought that he would see a little sadness or despair on their faces, but they were very calm. They were so calm that they did not hear the bad news that he brought. Perhaps they already had such an answer in their hearts. Except for the moment when they were told the truth, they would not show more than that. They would not be devastated and would not forget the purpose of guarding this place for 11 eras. It has already been 11 eras. The leader murmured and continued to talk to him in the language of the mythological era. He could not help but sigh and mutter to himself, "We have guarded this world for too long. It has been so long that we have forgotten the time that we bear. In this damned place where there are only nightmares, perhaps only forgetting can we pull ourselves together again. It is as if living is just to seek the meaning of deceiving ourselves." Yin was silent and did not interrupt his sigh. Being alive and forgetting time was a common problem of the immortals, especially in this place where it was so dry and quiet that it made people crazy. When the mind and soul that had long been numb suddenly heard that they had already lived for 11 eras, and when they inadvertently learned that everything they knew had turned into dust and ashes along with the void and the passage of time, even the gods would fall into a temporary state of confusion and confusion in an instant. After they had calmed down a little, Yin Nuashing slowly told them about the mythological era and the bits and pieces of information about this era. The information was trivial, but it had a wide range of implications and contained many details. The leader knew that a guy who had just appeared would not be so bored as to lie to them. Moreover, he had constructed the story so perfectly, unless he had lived in this fictional story for most of his life. Therefore, he felt that this information was not completely credible, but at least 60 to 70% of it could be confirmed. How are the gods of origin? The leader suddenly asked a little agitatedly, and Yin Nuashing froze. I can feel the presence of the gods of origin from you. You in them. Yin Nuashing shook his head. Unfortunately, I'm just a tool. The realm of the gods, you should know this name very well. Seeing that they quickly nodded, Yin Nuashing continued. I'm just the manager of that world. As for the gods of origin and the others, Yin Nuashing's lips trembled. He gritted his teeth and said with some difficulty, they have already left with the passing of that era. So, is the outside world now the chaos of the void supreme? What left Yin Nuashing a little stunned was that they did not seem to be surprised by this outcome. They just nodded casually as if they already knew that this would be the outcome. There was a faint sigh in the depths of their eyes, but their expressions did not become more twisted. It turned out that he was the only one who thought that this group of people would find it difficult to accept this outcome and be embarrassed for a long time. Order is still order. The overall situation of the void has not been reversed. Yin Nuashing shook his head. That era, the passing of your era, has taken away many things of the void. Many things have completely disappeared, and many things no longer exist. Even this place where you all fought has become a ruin. You all have lost 11 years of time. There are many things that have happened in the void. I can't explain it all in a short time. Now, can you tell me about this place? It would be better if you could tell me about this world and the war that you all experienced. About this place that you all call a ruin, there is actually not much worth mentioning. This place is just a border battlefield of that war. The leader showed a look of reminiscence as he spoke. He could not help but sigh softly. Yin Nuashing felt a chill all over his body. That war, the war that could make him show such a look of reminiscence, the war at the end of the mythological era. We were ordered to guard this region of the void. The main stage of that war was the center of the eightfold realm, with the realm of the gods as the center. By the way, speaking of the realm of the gods, you said that you are the manager of the realm of the gods? Yin Nuashing nodded. In order to confirm his words, he released the power of the observer again. His body was covered in a layer of light. Everyone sensed it, and their expressions changed slightly. The leader nodded. It is indeed the presence of the realm of the gods. There is no mistake about it. But why is it so weak? Yin Nuashing was about to explain something complicated when the leader said to himself, could it be that the realm of the gods was also affected by the tide of chaos, just like us? Tide of chaos? Yin Nuashing was slightly taken aback. He had never heard of such a thing. However, even if he knew, he might not be able to recognize what they were saying. Yes. The leader nodded and said slowly, that was a very long time ago. If there is no mistake, it should be about 10 epochs ago. The tide of chaos that swept in from the Sea of Void had washed away many things, including our power and their power. Everything was destroyed. Yin Nuashing, who was deep in thought, was slightly taken aback. He turned his attention. Your power? Don't be fooled by the fact that we are only at the pinnacle of origin now. We were once people of the primeval realm. The leader crossed his arms. When he said that, his face was full of pride. His team members all nodded in agreement. Yin Nuashing's eyes widened. The party I found at the last minute is a group of primeval heavenly gods. What should I do? Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. They were indeed at the pinnacle of origin now. As for the tide of chaos, he really did not know what it was. According to the leader's words, he had a small guess. He could not help but say, after the heavenly gods of origin passed away, many things in this world and this part of the void disappeared. They were destroyed. With their departure, that era had completely come to an end. Perhaps there was something in this world and this part of the void, but they all disappeared completely with the great upheaval caused by the heavenly gods of origin. Although I don't know what the tide of chaos you're talking about is, this is the result I have been searching for all these years. Oh, it sounds quite normal. Back then, someone seemed to have said that the heavenly gods of origin and something in this part of the void were interdependent. However, they did not respond in the end. What is the great upheaval that you mentioned just now? The leader looked at Yin Nuoxing curiously. The situation now was Yin Nuoxing might not know what they knew, and what Yin Nuoxing was searching for happened to be something they did not know about. Don't you know? The great upheaval of 11 eras? Yin Nuoxing was stunned again. Seeing that they were all shaking their heads, he did not hesitate to vaguely tell them part of the great upheaval that she had caused in the void. However, he did not dare to say who she was. He only referred to her as a heavenly god of origin. Is that so? Is that so? Because something unexpected happened on the battlefield where we were fighting, the void missed us and did not experience the great upheaval of chaos. The leader could not help but let out a long sigh when he heard this. Even the heavenly gods of origin and the others could not control that battle back then. That is why such a tragic scene occurred. The void upheaval, the tide of chaos, the declining void. Ha, those damn bastards. Look at what they have done to our world. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly asked, what is the tide of chaos that you mentioned just now? Well, if we're talking about the cause and effect, I am personally inclined to what you said just now. The leader nodded, crossing his arms. Then, as for our own senses, it was probably due to the passing of the heavenly gods of origin that the void lost something and fell into a state of decline. Some bits and pieces of the void's rules disintegrated and dissipated with that turbulence, and did not reappear when it was reassembled. As for us who were attached to the dissipated rules, we were naturally affected by the self-regulation of the void. The so-called tide of chaos is actually not a real tide, but a phenomenon. The reason it is called a tide is because it is observable and predictable when it comes, and when it leaves, it takes many things with it, which is why it is jokingly called tide. As for chaos, it is because what we fought back then was mostly the side of chaos, which is the power that was not the side of order. The heavenly god of origin is also affected by part of the rules of the void. Yin Nuoxing's face was full of disbelief. This was a little unbelievable. The heavenly god of origin had already transcended the rules of the void, so how could the heavenly god of origin be affected by it? The leader smiled and explained patiently, transcending the void and riding above it. But as long as we do not create our own void zone and weave everything by ourselves, then we will more or less be affected by the rules of the void. Coincidentally, the matter of the heavenly god of origin is related to the rules of the void back then. Therefore, we left that level together with the decline of the void and returned to the state where we're almost completely unaffected by the void. However, as I said before, if someone chooses to create their own void zone, then he may not be affected by this. However, such people are very, very rare and can be ignored. Creating a void zone is not something that anyone can do. Yin Nuoxing trembled when he heard this. He immediately thought of the underworld. The chaos tide had taken away many things in the void, including the heavenly god of origin. However, the underworld still kept a dozen or so heavenly gods of origin, and even planned to mass-produce them now. He did not believe that they were not special. However, if that was the case, how could they still ascend to the heavenly god of origin in this era? Hui and Changkong were the real heavenly gods of origin, and they definitely had just ascended to the void. Perhaps the method they chose involved rules that were still imprinted in the void, or perhaps they didn't need to use the rules of the void, just like how they opened up the void territory. However, the difficulty of these methods is quite high. Basically, no one in our era would use this method. To us, it's like self-torture, and it wouldn't be particularly different because of this. It's not easy to climb up to this realm, So why do you need to do something so strenuous and unrewarding, right? The leader explained and gave a very realistic answer. Yin Nuashing could not help but smile bitterly. As for after the tide of chaos, the leader was silent for a while. He wanted to enter a state of recollection, but he frowned with an uncomfortable expression. According to what you said, with the passing of our era, many things disappeared together with it. It's not as simple as our realms. There are many things that should be engraved in our minds, disappeared together with it. I can't even remember the name of any of the heavenly gods of origin, but I feel that I should know. Forget it. Let's not talk about that. No matter how much we talk about it, we can't recall those things. Perhaps many things should have disappeared with the void. Then let's not disturb those memories that are not allowed to stay. The leader suddenly waved his hand to end his contemplation. He looked at Yin Nuashing and said, "Let's continue talking about this space. The enemies that we were stationed here to deal with were the ones you just killed. Now, I don't even know why they exist and why they still exist. I only know that the only thing we need to do is to kill them all. The war back then has never ended. It is still going on in this battlefield. What are those enemies?" As soon as Yin Nuashing asked this question, he slapped himself on the forehead. He had already forgotten what he had just said. "Indeed, I have forgotten." The leader looked at Yin Nuashing helplessly. "At this moment, we only know that they are beings of the chaos plane that have non-order power. As for where they came from, to be honest, we have been struggling to hold on for the past 11 eras. We have never really defeated the enemy. We only know that they may have come from a spatial rift. As for what is behind the rift, we have no idea. Indeed, it is very bad." Yin Nuashing heard that and let out a long sigh. "It is as bad as the war back then. It is as bad as the current world of order." The last sentence was said to herself. It was so soft that they did not hear it. Yin Nuashing could not help but sigh. Just as they had guessed, there were very few things that they could know. The tide of chaos had destroyed many things related to that era. Even if that era had not been completely destroyed, it would not have exposed all the remaining traces in front of them. Speaking of which, he actually wanted to find a way to ascend to the realm of Yuanshi. But now, it seemed that the difficulty was still the same. The road ahead was vast. It was still unrealistic to obtain information related to that realm from a group of descendants of the gods. It was better to explore by himself. Perhaps one day, he would find a way out. The conversation ended. Both sides had heavy hearts. Yin Nuashing sighed more than the others. The leader and the others were not so bad. The battle in the past 11 eras had given them a lot of guesses about the current situation. Even if they were to be proven right now, they would not explode and die on the spot. At most, they would just sigh softly and turn around to dive into the eternal battle that belonged to them. The aura of order and non-order drifted in the stars, including the rotten aura that appeared when the two clashed. The three of them almost coexisted. Moreover, they filled the area that they were in at the moment. As for the other side of the spatial rift that the leader mentioned, that must be the base camp of the non-order forces. Chaos would reach the supreme realm of domination, and it would be difficult for order to survive. Fortunately, the range of order in this galaxy was still very large. As long as they did not wander around, it was not easy to encounter the non-order forces that were also wandering outside. Speaking of those non-order forces, Yin Nuashing muttered in his heart. When the little angel heard him muttering to himself, she quietly replied, "Don't you think that the aura of those people that you just killed is a little similar to the aura of the annihilation energy? However, it is a completely different kind of energy. Both of them are powers that belong to the pinnacle of the non-order plane." "Huh, now that you mention it, it is indeed very similar." Yin Nuashing grinned. Suddenly, an idea popped into his mind. However, he glanced at the leader and shook his head. It was not time yet. It might not be good to show it now. It is not the power of divine destruction either. It is pure non-order power. Compared to the distortion, the divine shadow clan, it does not seem to be particularly compatible. It is probably another type of non-order power. Say, how many types of non-order power do you think there are? Yin Nuashing replied, "Theoretically speaking, It is the same as non-order and order. Order can have as many types of power as non-order can have. Both of them are basically infinite. However, most of the life forms, including us, spend 99% of our time in the void of order. We rarely come into contact with the void of chaos. That is why we do not know much about the non-order power. If that is the case, the little angel suddenly thought of something. Could it be that those black-robed people are the same as the Divine Shadow Clan? They are all life forms that are affected by the non-order power? Ha! If the Divine Shadow Clan is affected by the power of that demonic shadow, its position in the non-order plane is quite high. It is probably comparable to the annihilation energy that killed them all those years ago. If your guess is correct, we might come into contact with a third power that stands at the pinnacle of the non-order plane. It is quite dangerous. Yin Nuoxing's expression became serious as he spoke. This was actually one of the possibilities. The other possibility was that the black-robed people were non-order life forms. However, theoretically speaking, there should not be so many of them. Either there was a mutation, or this idea was wrong. The two of them went back and forth for a period of time. They were skeptical of the conclusions that they came up with. In the end, they did not seem to have figured out anything. After a while, they felt a slight change in the space. They looked up and saw the blurry shadows of some buildings in the distance. It seemed that they had arrived at the campsite of this group of people. The non-order presence was effectively controlled here. Yin Nuoxing looked at the buildings that were getting closer and closer. He was still deep in thought. He could not help but murmur in his heart. This space, no, the mythological era. It was just a trace of that era. There were still many things that he could not see through. Thinking of this, he could not help but think of the war ruins. He thought of the fragments that were said to be in the deepest part of the ruins. He could not help but gulp. He felt that things were getting out of control again. Chapter 1559. Hope, an illusory thing, would fade and dissipate bit by bit over a long period of time. In the end, it would turn into numbness. Fighting on this forgotten battlefield numbly numb oneself. The day when the war would end would probably never come, but one could repeatedly comfort oneself that perhaps not much time had passed. Perhaps, one day, everything would end, the void would return to normal, and one could return to the life that one was familiar with. Even if the world that one knew was devastated and only scorched earth was left, at least one could still be alive. One could still clean up the broken world with one's own hands and make it glow with new vitality with one's own hands. Then, in the distant future, one could cultivate, chat, and fart in one's own world as before. After 11 eras, this simple extravagant hope had faded and become the last pillar buried in the bottom of one's heart. Facts had proven that even the primeval god would feel agitated and anxious in the face of this almost eternal war. Perhaps he had a mental breakdown, or perhaps he had gone crazy for boredom. But in the end, all of them turned into numbness, treating all the chaos in front of them as a lifetime that he had devoted all his efforts to. Yin Nuoxing clearly felt that after he arrived, a faint color called hope emerged in the hearts of the people. But it was very faint, the kind that was suppressed in the bottom of their hearts and would not be exposed casually. Perhaps, other than the color in the bottom of their hearts, they would no longer have any so-called hope. Yet, there was a little bit of hope in them. This feeling, to be honest, it was a bit terrible, being the hope of others. Actually, it was a very stressful thing. It was not as, beautiful as it sounded. As the biggest bully in the void, he could still cope with it when he broke into other worlds and inexplicably became the hope of others. But here, well, he did not think that they would think that way. After all, they were the primeval gods group. They were a group of old monsters who had walked on the road and fought more battles than he had eaten. This was not counting the dozens of eras that he had lived in. If he really counted them, perhaps no one in the great Yuan realm had lived longer than him. Why did he have to think about such a stupid thing? The huge temple had an even larger internal space that did not match its size. This was the most important temple among a group of buildings that he had seen from afar. At this moment, he was walking quickly along the very long corridor. Beside him was Jing Yun, the leader just now, although he did not know why Jing Yun had brought him here. This is the Origin Shrine. From the name, you should be able to make some connections. This thing was left behind by them. Jing Yun pointed at the huge shrine and said to Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing stopped breathing and her expression froze. There was no need to think about it at all. In the entire Great Yuan realm, in the entire Eight Elements realm, there was no one who dared to use the word origin as the name of a certain place or building. It could only be left behind by the most mysterious guy in the Great Yuan realm. However, it was a little regrettable that he did not feel any aura that belonged to them from the Origin Shrine. At that time, he could still feel their aura in the illusion that he had bumped into in the world of Origin. It was the kind of aura that belonged to the Origin, the Great Yuan realm. Perhaps this Origin Shrine was not as powerful as he had thought. Sure enough, Jing Yun's words confirmed his thoughts. In fact, these are the node-like buildings that the Origin Heavenly God and the others had set up in various parts of the void. The power of the world of order can set up a camp with these nodes as the center. However, with the passing of the wave of chaos, it has also lost the power that belonged to the Origin Heavenly God. It is a little regrettable. In the past, when that power was still around, the power of chaos of this level would be cut down like a dog just by entering this world, let alone getting close to it. Yin Nuoxing could not help but smile bitterly. He did not feel that the exaggeration was strange at all. After all, it was the power of the Origin Heavenly God. Even if it was just an order node that was set up all over the void, it was certainly not something that could be stopped by the ordinary power of chaos. In his opinion, if it was not a power of the same level as the demonic shadow or the annihilation energy, it should be impossible to crush the defensive power set up by any of the nodes. As for that kind of scene, it was definitely impossible to see. The only thing he could recall was the illusion that he had seen in the world of Origin, which was actually more shocking than any other scene. After walking through a long corridor, Jing Yun led them to a very large hall. It was a huge circular hall, and the space itself was especially huge. However, other than the two walls where the floor and the door were, there were some huge, unknown things that stretched out from the other four walls. They were twisting and turning in the space, like some kind of special structure, and these huge structures just happened to occupy nearly half of the space in the hall. Those abstract structures were dazzling. They were flowing with a huge amount of energy, and dazzling light kept flowing inside the structures, indicating that there was a huge amount of energy flowing through the place where the light was flowing. The light flowed in the structure, projecting light and shadow on the walls of the hall. As the light flowed, the light and shadow kept moving, but there was one place that was constantly under the illumination of the energy, light, and shadow. In the middle of the hall, where the structure on the four walls pointed to, there was a huge black stone platform that was about 10 feet in size. The circular stone platform shrank level by level in the pattern of a staircase, and the difference between each level was only a little more than a foot. It was about 6 or 7 meters tall, and at the top was a black pillar that was much slimmer than the stone platform, and above the pillar was a square. Where is this? Yin Nuoxing scanned the hall, her gaze lingering on the black stone platform. After a long time, she turned her gaze to Jing Yun, waiting for him to explain. This is the central area of the Temple of Origin, and also the place where the temple carries the energy. As you can see, there is still a huge amount of energy flowing in the hall, but it has completely stopped moving, and there is no longer any movement. Jing Yun sighed and raised his finger to point at the square at the top of the black stone platform. I came to let you see that. You are the, manager of the God Realm, and you also have a part of the Origin Heavenly God's power, so this thing is most suitable for you to handle. What is that? Yin Nuoxing stared at the square for a long time, but she could not see anything, and her face was blank. According to what Jing Yun said, that square was very likely to be, as I said just now, that is the power that the Origin Heavenly God left behind in the Temple of Origin. Jing Yun said softly, and could not help but sigh. In the past, We still had a way to activate it to fight against the enemy, but now we don't have any. Probably no one in the void can activate this power, and the other side should be connected to the origin heavenly god and the others, but you should be able to give it a try. Come on. Jing Yun waved her hand and walked towards the stone platform, and Yun Nuoxing followed a second later. His eyes were still scanning the hall. He did not feel a trace of the origin energy, but it was releasing a faint tremor in his body, as if it was because of this hall. This place felt familiar to them, and perhaps they had existed here before, but had dissipated with time. Jing Yun fiddled with the stone platform for a while, and after a series of dazzling movements, the stone platform suddenly flickered, and then mysterious runes that Yun Nuoxing could not understand emerged from the surface of the stone platform. They were evenly arranged on each layer of the stone platform, and the colorful light illuminated the black stone platform, which looked a little dazzling. The palm-sized black square at the top of the stone platform suddenly rotated on its own, and 3 dim energy halos appeared, slowly and continuously revolving around the square. Yun Nuoxing walked to the top of the stone platform with Jing Yun and looked at the square on the stone platform in front of them at a close distance. Her expression trembled slightly, and she suddenly let out a little scream and took half a step back. "What's wrong with you?" Jing Yun hurriedly turned around when she heard the voice and saw Yun Nuoxing's slightly shocked and serious expression, as if she had seen something and was startled. She could not help but feel a little happy. "It's probably resonating with a part of your power. Although I don't know what you saw, there's no need to worry." Yun Nuoxing hesitated for a moment, and suddenly swept her gaze to the other parts of the hall. Seeing that Jing Yun did not move at all, she could not help but raise a finger in the air. "What are those?" Jing Yun tilted her head and looked in the direction that he was pointing, and what she saw was an abstract creation of laws. "Oh, that's the creation of laws that is specially used in this hall. It's used to store the power of the origin heavenly god and the others. Although there's still power flowing inside, it can't be released at all." He did not finish his sentence because he saw Yun Nuoxing vigorously shaking her head and could not help but be stunned. She heard him say, "I'm talking about those things that are floating around in the air. They're darting around between the creation of laws and, like wandering souls." Jing Yun was dumbfounded. "Although I expected that you would see something, what did you see?" "I can't see those things at all. You can study them yourself." "Huh?" Yun Nuoxing replied hesitantly, scratching his head. In his line of sight, mysterious runes appeared on the surface of the entire hall's walls, and on the surface of the creation of laws that protruded out of the walls. There was a weak origin energy flowing in them, and in addition to these things, there were also some white transparent spheres about a foot in diameter floating in the hall. Inside each of these spheres, there was a rune that was similar to the runes engraved on the walls. Moreover, there are many types of them, and they contained a considerable amount of energy. They floated around the entire hall and did not seem to have a consciousness. However, he felt that they were watching the only 2 people in the hall. No, it felt more like they were watching him, and it made his hair stand on end. However, Jing Yun said that he could not see anything, and it made him feel like he was in a ghost story. And if these things related to the origin heavenly god were related to him, TSK, he felt that the ball of light in his heart was flickering very quickly. "Come over and take a look." Jing Yun beckoned Yun Nuoxing from the front. He stared at the cube and sighed. "This hall is the core of the origin temple, and this cube is actually something like a trump card. Due to the influence of the chaos tide, it is difficult for the 2 to recover from their chaotic state. No, it looks like they have recovered, but for some reason, the 2 are affecting each other at this moment. So, I want you to touch it. If you can take this cube away, the defensive core of this hall will be functional again, and it will be easier for us to fight those guys." Jing Yun could not help but feel strange when he did not see Yun Nuoxing as he spoke. He turned around and asked, what are you doing?" He saw Yun Nuoxing staring at the sky, as if he was having a seizure. He took 2 steps forward and trembled, then silently took 2 steps back and breathed a sigh of relief. Then he trembled forward, then relaxed backward, then forward. He did not know why he was jumping there repeatedly. It seemed that he was fighting the air with his wits and courage. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Listen to me. It is not that I want to jump here repeatedly, but as he spoke, he took 2 steps towards Jingyan. Then, there might be more than 10,000 transparent balls of light in the room, all trembled and rushed towards them. When he took 2 steps closer, he was so scared that he quickly retreated. Then, the group of light balls also took 2 steps back. They are following me. As long as I move forward, they will come over, and as long as I retreat, they will retreat. I'm scared. In the spiritual world, Jing Yuanji and the others were all speechless. They did not know whether to laugh or cry. A guy who could fight against the heavenly god of primordial beginning was actually scared in the face of a group of light balls of unknown origin. While they all knew that the light balls must have something to do with the heavenly god of origin, and it just so happened that this guy had an inexplicable fear of the heavenly god of origin. Probably because he was too deeply involved with the heavenly god of destruction. The little angel had a deep feeling. If it was only related to the mythological era, it would be fine, but once it was related to the heavenly god of origin, this guy began to follow his heart. Seeing this, Jingyan did not know whether to laugh or cry. The things set up by the heavenly god of origin and the others. What are you afraid of? The heavenly god of origin will not harm the life of the order. Yin Nuoxing wanted a curse. He had been tortured by the heavenly god of origin and the others many times, and every time he was not scared but not in danger. Although he was scared but not in danger in the end, he did not want to experience the feeling of being scared. Logically speaking, he should not have gone to that place back then. Then, he would not have been in such a situation. It's okay. Jingyan did not know whether to laugh or cry. She shook her head and comforted him. Don't worry, there really won't be a problem. I dare to guarantee it with my divinity. What if your divinity collapses? Yin Nuoxing's words were stuck in his throat, and he could not say it out loud. His face turned red, and he paced back and forth for a while. Then, he took a deep breath and summoned the greatest courage in his life. Then he placed Frost in his arms in the space just now and carefully approached the stone platform. Then, the group of floating light balls also approached him little by little. Both sides moved in unison, trembling with every step. Jingyan looked at Yin Nuoxing's cautious and almost stumbling steps with a strange expression on her face. She wanted to laugh, but felt that it was inappropriate. Maybe it was because she really could not see anything, so she could not understand why Yin Nuoxing was so careful and funny. Although she could not see, she observed the expression on his face. Judging from his increasingly frightened and his footsteps getting lighter and lighter, as if he could not wait to turn around and run away, the light balls should be on his face soon. Yin Nuoxing stood firmly 3 meters away from the light balls. He could already see that the light balls were 3 meters away from him. Originally, the light balls were very scattered in the hall, so he did not feel that there were too many of them. But now, they were all piled up together. It looked like he had broken into an ant's nest and saw densely packed ant eggs squeezed together. Moreover, these eggs were all round and were more than a foot long, which made him feel inexplicably horrified. Looking at the last 3 meters, Yin Nuoxing swallowed hard. Suddenly, he let out a loud cry, which scared Jingyan. Then, he rushed forward like a fierce tiger coming down from the mountain. The floating light balls all shook and rushed toward Yin Nuoxing with a bang. I don't care. I'll run after I touch it. I don't believe that I can't run out of here. Yin Nuoxing shouted loudly. He did not even look at the cube as he grabbed it. It was burning hot in his palm. Then he stomped his foot on the ground and turned his body 180 degrees in an instant. He exerted force in his ankle and was about to rush directly toward the door when the light balls, surging from behind, all collided into his vision. It reminded him of a terrible thing. He was surrounded from all sides. Boom! After a short and hurried roar, Jingyan felt a wave of energy rush towards him, and he couldn't help but close his eyes. After a while, he opened his eyes with a face full of question marks. He saw Yin Nuoxing's entire body lying straight on the ground, his hands stretched out with his face facing down. It was a perfect posture of falling, and he was stunned to see it. Buzz, buzz, the buzzing sound of energy in the hall stole his attention. Jingyan noticed that many energy runes had appeared on the walls of the hall. Those runes broke free from the restraints of the walls and floated in the air. A powerful energy was gradually awakening from its slumber. Jingyan could not help but feel a burst of joy in his heart. The protection of this temple had reappeared. Good Lord, he really did it, as expected of the manager of the realm of the gods. Speaking of which, was there such a thing back then? Jingyan scratched his head in puzzlement. He looked at the energy runes that had been reactivated and floated in the space of the hall. He crouched down and carried Yin Nuoxing on his shoulders as he walked out of the hall. Let's go. A guy who was protected by the gods of origin. What an enviable guy. Back then, there were so many people who wanted to see them, but could not. You, on the other hand, were protected by them directly. Jingyan knew that there was something wrong with Yin Nuoxing when they first met. After confirming that he was related to the realm of the gods, Jingyan knew everything. To be honest, he even suspected that this guy was taken care of by the gods of origin since he was young. Perhaps he was the son of one of the gods of origin or something. He must have grown up with them since he was young. Otherwise, he could not explain why he had more than 100 runes. Jingyan closed the door of the hall. He could feel the surging energy behind him. Then he looked outside again. Suddenly, a majestic and incomparably sacred energy surged out of the huge building complex. Although it could not be compared to 11 years ago, the light and power it released were still recognized by countless people in the building complex. Everyone rushed out of the building and found the source of the energy explosion. There was a hint of shock in their eyes, along with unconcealable ecstasy and excitement. That energy was so dazzling and beautiful that they could not help but want to worship it. The power of the gods of origin. Nodes. The temple of origin is functioning again. This damned war is over. Jingyan could not help but smile when he heard the loud screams. The defense line with the help of the temple of origin was what their defense line should be like back then. If the war ended like this, it would definitely be this guy's credit. Ugh. At percent at asterisk. Dollar. However, this hero seemed to be unconscious now. He did not know what he saw, but he was now talking nonsense. Jingyan did not know whether to laugh or cry. He found a room in the temple of origin and settled him down. Next, he would discuss with his old buddies on the other side how to end the war. In the empty gray space, Yin Nuoxing walked in a trance in this space where he could not see the sky and the earth. It was as if he was walking in the clouds, as if he was wrapped in a layer of clouds and kept walking. At a certain moment, he suddenly woke up and opened his eyes wide with trembling. What entered his eyes was a gray mist, and he could not find his direction. He did not know where he was, and it made him suddenly think of the time when he was sprinkled with her blood and entered that dream. A little fear appeared in his heart, and then he fell silent again. He took a deep breath and shouted loudly, "Girl, little you, Blue Phoenix, Yuan Ji, here, what happened? What happened? Is the sky falling and the earth sinking? Little star? Lord Feng, I'm here." The voices of the four girls echoed in his mind in an instant. Yin Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief. "No, I'm just calling you. What did you see? A foggy space. I don't know where I am. I just closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was here." Hearing Jing Yuanji's response, Yin Nuoxing pursed his lips. It seemed that his soul or consciousness had entered this space together with him, a space related to the gods of origin. Min and the others were also here. However, they had no experience at all and were a little uneasy. Yin Nuoxing said a few words to calm him down. Then he looked at the space and took a deep breath. Then, according to the old rules, he turned around and walked in a random direction. Anyway, let's just go down first. Chapter 1560. In the misty space, he cannot feel the existence of space itself, time, order, and rules. It was as if he had been exiled to a corner of the void and nothingness. He could not see or find anything. There was only loneliness and absurdity in his eyes. Walking in this world, he did not feel like he was stepping on solid ground. He was still breathing, but what he inhaled and exhaled did not feel like air. It was some kind of airy. He could not tell what kind of energy it was. Boom, 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 boom. The reason why he felt like he was wrapped in a huge layer of clouds and mist was that he could hear such muffled sounds of thunder coming from afar from time to time. The rumbling sounds came from afar, but he could not see any light of energy release at the end of his vision. He could not feel any movement of energy turbulence. It seemed that there was only sound, and there was no transmission of energy. His palm gently waved across the space in front of him, dispersing a wisp of clouds, revealing more clouds behind him. He could not see the end, nor could he see anything else. Yin Nuoxing stared at the space outside of the clouds that he did not know if it existed or not. However, no matter how far his gaze moved, he could still only see this misty world. If there was a limit, then the area he saw just now was at least as large as a galaxy. What the hell is in this place? It's so misty everywhere. Where's the road? Yuan Kong couldn't help but yell in his soul. Min and the others, who were sitting cross-legged at the side, opened their eyes and looked outside. It was still the same scene, and they couldn't help but sigh. They had been wandering around in this damn place for 6 hours, and there really wasn't any change at all. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment. He hugged Frost tighter in his arms and said, "Be patient. The things left by the God of Origin are all like this. I have seen them more than once, especially these things that were not deliberately left behind. They are probably not deliberately left behind, and they are even harder to find. I don't even know if they left something here." Hearing this, the little angel said that Jing Yun could not see them before. It means that they did not know about the existence of those light balls. The cube and the light balls may have other uses. They were not left for them, but for you, or someone like you who has inherited their power. Yin Nuoxing was stunned by her words. If it were not for the last sentence that caught his attention, he might have gone crazy by now. Damn, the last thing he wanted to get involved in was the matter of the God of Origin. He was just an insignificant observer. If he got involved in the game of the God of Origin, he would not even know how he died. Well, sometimes there were things that he had no choice in. Just like now. He had stressed it 10,000 times, but he still fell into the trap left behind by the God of Origin. Now his heart and soul were hanging in the air by the rope. They were neither up nor down, and he felt uneasy all over. It was useless to talk about this now. The only thing he could do was to find a way out quickly. The power of his God's soul surged rapidly in this space, spreading rapidly to the distance. As his God's soul surged unscrupulously, he heard a vigorous tremor of energy. It was the sound of the muffled thunder just now. But when he tried to find the source of the sound, he could only receive more echoes. Before it could spread further, the rolling thunder had already run over him. But he still found the general direction. It was a little far, very far away. "Big idiot, what are you looking for? Aren't you looking for the exit?" Yuan Kong asked anxiously when he saw how Run lifting his foot and walking into the distance again. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and said, "This space, it is impossible to get out directly. I thought it was just my soul that came in, but after I took Frost out of that space, I realized that this is another specious space. I thought it was my soul, but in fact, it may not be so. Otherwise, I would not have come into contact with a space that should only exist outside. The grace left behind by the heavenly God of Origin is always used to torment people. I've been tormented over and over again for who knows how many times. I keep feeling that my entire body is branded and toyed with. TSK, why am I saying all this?" Everyone was speechless. God knows what you were thinking just now. How could you say such a creepy line? Ahem. Yin Nuoxing felt a series of strange emotions coming from his soul. He coughed softly and said, "In short, the only thing we can do now is to find the source of this space, find the reason and meaning of this space's existence. Only then can we find the way out. If we can't find the way out, we will be trapped here forever, just like the last time when I was splashed with blood." Yin Nuashing heaved a long sigh of relief. He moved a little and walked in a direction. Just after he took 2 steps, the rolling thunder came from afar, splashing echoes in the clouds and then sweeping the space behind him. It was the thunder that he heard just now. It took a long time to reach here, so he did not know how far it was. He wasn't sure if he would discover anything when he found the origin of the thunderous roar, but he didn't have any other choice. He could only take things one step at a time. As for the matter of the heavenly god of origin, he would just be a test subject and a recipient. There was no need for him to dream of being a controller. He was no longer entering the space created by the god of origin's power. Yin Nuashing was very patient. He walked slowly and slowly into the distance, not feeling nervous at all. But this time, it was a little strange. He accidentally came to a secret realm that had gone out of control in the void frontline. He accidentally came to a war site, went deeper and deeper, and came into contact with these things. It was unexpected. It was a little coincidental, a little deliberate. He did not think that there was anyone behind all this, but it was too simple to string all these things together. It was difficult for him not to think in the wrong direction. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment. His eyes narrowed for a moment, and then he took a deep breath. The colors on his body quickly faded, replaced by a white that was so pure that it was almost transparent. He withdrew all his energy, leaving only the power of the observer of the divine realm. His body was filled with white color, and if it was not for the faint light, he would have melded with this space. It was a state of energy resonance that he rarely used. By releasing the essence of a certain power, he would turn himself into a stable source of energy that released energy to his surroundings. He would try to connect with all things in the world, trying to feel the feeling of becoming one. At the same time, it would allow him to better observe anything he came into contact with. It was not just his senses, even his perspective would change. For example, right now, while it was still foggy and there was not even the slightest energy reaction. Hey, that's strange. There are times when the state of energy resonance fails. Yin Nuashing spat out a mouthful of water. In this state, he had even fused with the undamaged Book of Epics. Generally speaking, there would not be a situation where he could not understand, sense, or analyze it. Now, it seemed that he could not deal with things that involved the heavenly god of origins in the usual way. However, he could still feel the existence of some things. For example, right now, he felt that something was slowly entering his soul as he walked in this foggy space. Instantly, he broke out in cold sweat. That feeling was very, very vague, like being bitten by a mosquito on the back. He could not feel anything until it was over. If he had not entered the state of energy resonance, he would not have realized that part of this foggy space had condensed into a whirlpool, and the other end of the whirlpool had directly entered his soul. Something was flowing into this foggy space, but he did not feel anything at all. Even though he was watching himself being beaten, he did not feel anything. Girl, is there any abnormal change in my soul? Yin Nuashing hurriedly looked for the little angel, who was inextricably entangled with his soul. Sometimes, she could sense the changes in his soul more clearly than he could. However, this time, the little angel simply shook her head, and because their souls were connected, she knew what he was thinking. No, there are no changes, and I can't find where this gray fog has gone into my soul. I feel like I'm going to die. What should I do? The little angel did not know whether to laugh or cry. After a while, her expression gradually changed. She pondered for a while, and with a very, very serious expression, she said word by word, "I'll accompany you, no matter what." Yin Nuashing's pretty face blushed. Ahem, ahem, putting aside the confession that the little angel suddenly slapped on his face. Yin Nuashing carefully checked his soul for a while. After making sure that there seemed to be no effect, he decided not to care about this matter anymore. He sped up and walked forward. After a while, he felt a slight change in his surroundings. The rolling speed of the clouds and mist increased, as if he had entered an area swept by a strong wind. He could see that the thing that poured into his soul was flowing faster. Other than that, he did not feel anything else. Also, he felt that the speed of the clouds and mist slapping on his face had increased. Just these 2 points. Vaguely, he could hear the murmurs of something. It seemed like someone was whispering in his ear. It was a very small sentence that he could not hear clearly. There was no way to tell what was being said. It seemed to be some kind of meaningless syllables that were pieced together to form sentences. However, as he listened, his brain seemed to automatically organize them into plausible sentences. After some processing by his own imagination, the meaningless murmurs seemed to have a real meaning, but it was still difficult to tell what was being said. The original divine language. Yin Nuoshing frowned. He felt a little troubled. The language of the mythological era was still manageable, but now that the original divine language had appeared, how could he distinguish the meaning of these words? Anyway, let's write it down first. Girl, you and I each write down a copy. The little angel nodded. She imprinted the long and fragmented voice in the memory fragments and stored them separately. This was the experience that they had when they encountered the origin nonsense, the name that they had just given it. Occasionally, when they encountered this kind of thing, there would be some deviation in their memories. What should have been a pure and clean memory fragment would become mottled with something mixed in. It was probably because the origin nonsense itself contained some residual power of order and rules, so there would be some deviation in their memories afterward. So what was that voice saying? After trying hard to distinguish for a while, Yin Nuoshing smiled bitterly and gave up. Let's not talk about the fragmented voice that did not have much practical meaning. He did not understand the original divine language in the first place, so why should he put on a constipated look here? He felt that he could distinguish it clearly, so he quickly came back to his senses and walked forward. In the foggy ocean where the clouds and clouds were surging, he walked forward in a slightly pleasant but not relaxed mood. The talent that was branded deep in his bones was not activated. He even became a little nervous as he walked forward. He put on an optimistic attitude and looked at the sea of clouds and clouds that were surging faster around him. His mood, which was barely pleasant, gradually became a little solemn. Moreover, he had completely lost his sense of the outside world. Even though he knew that he was in a rather dangerous place and was surrounded by fourth ranks, it was difficult for him to feel anxious about what was going to happen outside. A sound that sounded like a water harp suddenly buzzed behind his head. He was already highly focused to deal with this space. At this moment, when this slightly frightening sound suddenly appeared, Yin Nuoshing almost jumped up. He turned his head around as if he had a stroke and looked at the clouds and clouds that were surging, but there was nothing. It was quiet all around. The clouds and clouds were surging, but there was no sound of wind. After waiting for about 10 minutes, nothing happened. Even the echo of the muffled thunder had disappeared at some point. It was so quiet that only his heartbeat could be heard. Oh, that ball of light only flashed and did not make any sound. Ding! The sound of the wind chimes swaying was very clear in front of him. He turned his head around as if he was crazy, but he still saw nothing. However, this time, the sound did not disappear. More wind chimes rang out one after another, tinkling in his ears. It was as if he was in a long corridor with blue wind chimes hanging on the windowsills on both sides. They were swaying with the breeze, making crisp sounds. Moreover, they were getting louder and louder, almost like a muffled thunderclap. It was so loud that his eardrums could not stand it anymore. The sound was no longer crisp, and it no longer made him feel relaxed. It only made him feel irritated and manic. Then, the world instantly fell into silence, and all the sounds returned to silence. Yin Nuoshing swallowed a mouthful of saliva and felt his chin itchy. He rubbed it with his shoulder, and only then did he realize that it was a string of beads of sweat, and his pretty face had unknowingly been covered in sweat. Big idiot. Let's not go. Let's go back. Yuan Kong's soul trembled as he spoke his thoughts. Living beings would always feel curious about the unknown, but they would also feel fear and reverence for no reason. They were no exception. And when this unknown thing was related to the origin heavenly God, the latter's two emotions almost reached the peak, and he forgot all his curiosity. Phew! Yin Nuoshing let out a long sigh of relief and comforted him. "Don't worry, I'm here. I'll bring you out safely. Don't worry." Dao Tian rolled his eyes and said, "Big brother, who are you trying to curry favor with by acting cool now?" Yin Nuoxing said, "The atmosphere terminator." What's more, he just subconsciously said this sentence. He didn't think much about it just now. After walking for a while in the silent space, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt that his ears had returned. The sound of the wind. It was the sound of someone whispering in his ear. He instantly got goosebumps. Boom! Rumble. Just as they collectively felt that these origin heavenly gods were really old and indecent, the sound of thunder that had disappeared in the distance rang out once again, washing away all the horror that he had felt just now. They all acted as if nothing had happened. Yin Nuoxing stared at the dusky space in front of him and continued to walk forward. This time, he continued to walk forward together with the sound of thunder and did not stop. It was here. It was another whisper that directly echoed in the depths of his soul. The sound of thunder in his ears had not stopped. The whisper sounded more like someone was talking to him. It was as if someone was sitting next to him and telling him something or pouring out their troubles. He appeared very calm, as if he had known the person for a long time and was already used to such words. Occasionally, he would smile helplessly and bitterly. Countless figures flashed through his mind. They were all the people that he had known in his life for almost 100 years. Some of them were quite strange. Some of them were familiar, but also unfamiliar. According to the timeline, the first figures that flashed through his mind were the people that he knew in the Dark Age. Then, according to the timeline of the Ancient Age, they were probably the memories of the time when he was escaping from the lower realm. In other words, they were the things that happened between the 80th era and the 120 years. Unfortunately, he had chosen to seal that part of his memory, so he could barely remember who those people were. He only had a rough understanding of them. It was like the slight bitterness of weak tea, but also like the joy of a festive occasion. Among the many forms of life, there seemed to be a few scenes that were quite important. But what was missing? Therefore, looking at the life of almost 100 eras, walking beyond the mortal realm and among the innumerable worlds, the role he played and the meaning of his existence was to see those people and things, to witness the birth of a story. Meanwhile, he himself had always been wandering beyond the story, beyond the world. Was that so? Then, in his so-called life at this moment, in this so-called, did he have a part to play? Perhaps it was just an insignificant part. In the end, he was just an observer, and that was all. Little star, wake up. Amidst the rumbling of thunder beside his ears, there was a sudden sound that brought him back to his senses. Yin Nuoxing quickly blinked a few times and breathed a long sigh of relief. "I'm fine. I was just imagining things." The rumbling of thunder and the sound of wind chimes can bring back memories, probably because there are too many memories to bear. That's probably why I was suddenly implicated and recalled too many memories. But there's no problem. A cluster of dazzling light suddenly lit up in front of him, causing him to squint slightly and tilt his head. When his eyes adjusted to the light and looked ahead again, it was as if the clouds were parting to see the sun. In this place where the clouds were rolling, the clouds suddenly dispersed bit by bit, revealing the sun that was blocked by them. He hesitated for a moment, then lifted his feet and walked forward without looking back. His consciousness gradually rose from the darkness to the surface. His eyelids trembled slightly for a moment, and then he opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was a ceiling about 5 or 6 meters away from him. It was not gorgeous or luxurious, but there was a heavy, ancient, and sacred charm in it. Those complicated patterns and runes pieced together made him, who had just woken up, a little dizzy. There was a faint light in the room. The dim light dispelled the darkness. He could see the room clearly even without using this level of light. He looked at it and found that it seemed to be the faint light emitted by the runes and complicated patterns on the wall. Realizing that he was lying on the bed, Yin Nuoxing lazily laid down for a while before he slowly got up. Suddenly, he saw something from the corner of his eyes. He could not help but turn his head and saw Frost lying on the ground beside him. Judging from the posture just now, The two of them should be lying at a right angle with their heads facing each other. Judging from this, the bed was really big. Speaking of which, the things on the bed were also engraved with those complicated patterns and runes, and he could not understand them. Was this some kind of mental attack? Was it used to make the person who had just woken up to lie down and sleep after seeing the patterns? Yin Nuoxing heaved a long sigh as she restrained the thoughts that had just gone berserk after returning from the strange space. She would not be able to figure out what had just happened in that space for a while, but now, there should be something more important. Before she passed out, she felt that she was being carried on a person's shoulder like a cargo. She also heard some noises, which were quite noisy, as if they were saying something like battle, war, victory, and so on. By the way, she did hear some kind of noise now. The sound of battle, the sound of fierce battle. She could not perceive the situation outside, probably because the isolation ability of this house was too good. From various details, it was not difficult to tell that she should be in the sanctum of origin. Moreover, this room did not look like a room for humans to sleep in. For some reason, she suddenly felt a chill on her back. Is this the sanctum of origin? Yin Nuoxing tidied herself up and carried Frost in her arms. Then, she walked towards the door. She could feel that there was a huge amount of holy energy flowing in the sanctum. It was much weaker than the origin energy, but in terms of nature, it had a very strong suppressive effect on non-order forces. However, it seemed to be ineffective against the annihilation energy. After the annihilation energy in her body felt the energy coming from the sanctum, it rolled its eyes and did not say anything, probably because it was not a threat, but it should be enough to deal with another group of enemies in this world. Let's go and have a look. Witness the real end of the war in the mythological era. Chapter 1561. It was very dangerous to be immersed in any consciousness space left behind by the heavenly god of origins. It contained many things that had passed away, secret history, bits and pieces of that era, knowledge and information of that era, and many other things. Along with these things, there was also a hidden danger. Whether it was the opportunity deliberately left behind by the heavenly god of origins, or the things that were inadvertently left behind, they were definitely not for ordinary people to use. If they touched them casually, they might get themselves killed before they could obtain or learn anything. The corresponding power corresponded to the corresponding knowledge and information, and those things were never left for ordinary people. This was also the main reason why Yin Nuoxing was so resistant to the things left behind by the heavenly god of origins. As for the secondary reason, it was because he was already scared. Among the few incidents that he had encountered with the heavenly god of origins, none of them had ended well. He always felt that this was retribution, even if he was unconsciously involved in their affairs. Well, that was not entirely true. At least this time, his ending was still normal. He did not get his head crooked, his nose flattened, and his face swollen. There was also no out-of-body experience or mental pain. What was rare was that he was able to preserve his own life. It should be noted that in the past few incidents, he had survived half dead. This time, when he walked around in the misty space, his soul seemed to have been tampered with by some invisible hand. Other than that, nothing else seemed to have happened. It was just that he always felt that the space was not complete and seemed to be a little fragmented. It seemed to want to show him something, but nothing was shown. Was it because of some special reason, some reason that could affect the power of the heavenly god of origins? Was it because they had fallen? For the time being, the reason was still unclear. A certain observer felt that even if he racked his brains here and vomited blood, he would not be able to come up with a reason. He simply threw all these matters to the back of his mind. If there was a follow-up to this matter, there would be a time when he would encounter it. In any case, at his level, he could only be safely arranged when encountering the origins. At most, he would struggle awkwardly for a while or two. With all kinds of complicated feelings, Yin Nuoxing slowly walked out of the Temple of Origin. Looking ahead, he could not help but let out a surprised and stunned gasp. In front of his eyes, the starry sky was burning with a huge amount of energy sparks. Jing Yun and the others were standing behind the line of fire. They carried a huge amount of energy from the world of order and were wantonly releasing their power in front of them. They were clashing head-on with the black-robed people who outnumbered them by almost 100 times. Endless energy poured in this starry sky. In terms of a battle of this level, this starry sky should have collapsed quickly due to the destruction of order and rules. The reason why this had not happened yet was probably because of the theoretical barrier. In the end, he would not be surprised if anything blew up in a battle of this level. The commotion caused by a battle between high-level beings was no joke. The battle between them and the underworld had already included the entire 8 Elements realm in advance. Along the way, other than the origin world, the void and nothingness were also destroyed. Many huge marks across the void had yet to recover. The hideous scars in the void were telling the pain of thousands of years of silence to the empty seats in the void. Furthermore, the battle 11 years ago had wiped out the entire Yuan realm, leaving many irreparable scars that affected the Yuan realm like sequelae. When Yun Nuoxing carried Frost to the battlefield, Jing Yun had just led the entire battle line forward. The power from the Temple of Origin had finally given them a chance to counterattack. If it was handled well, this battle could even last until the end. Their power has retreated. The God of Origin is protecting us. Let the warriors push forward. This world is ours. Victory belongs to the world of order. Beside Jing Yun, a red-haired middle-aged man with a few mustaches waved his hand and shouted passionately. Then, he turned around and walked to Jing Yun's side. The entire line has been sealed. At this rate, they will be suppressed near the spatial fissure in less than a day. When they reach a certain point, I can begin to prepare to destroy the fissure. When we're near the fissure, we can begin to observe and prepare. For now, we should focus all our forces on the battlefield. Jingya nodded. Suddenly, she felt an aura appear beside her. The few of them turned their gazes and saw Yun Nuoxing appear beside them, looking at the battlefield with interest. He could not help but smile. You're awake. You've been asleep for a total of 66 hours. Was it that long? Yun Nuoxing was startled for a moment. In that misty space, he was extremely insensitive to the flow of time. It was difficult for him to sense how much time had passed. He thought that at most a day had passed, but he did not expect that in the blink of an eye, it was almost 3 days. During the time when you were asleep, we launched a counterattack. With the power of the Temple of Origin, we took back our lost ground after a long time. We have been preparing for this counterattack for countless years. As for them, Jingyan pointed at the group of people in black robes in front of them and said, they are probably mobilizing all their forces and preparing to fight to the death with us. It seems that we are all planning to finish this battle in one fell swoop. Yun Nuoxing nodded. The momentum of this all-out attack showed that they were planning to fight to the end and would not stop until they died. There would not be any more pauses in the middle, unlike the Netherworld realm, which had been fighting for 100 million years like a stroke and suddenly stopped. Sai, who knew what they were thinking. He is the little outsider you mentioned, the successor of the god of Origin, the one who activated the Temple of Origin. The red-haired uncle curiously moved closer to Yun Nuoxing. His fiery red eyes scanned Yun Nuoxing's body, which made Yun Nuoxing's scalp tingle. Well, not bad. It is indeed their scent. It is very strong. If it were not for the fact that their realms and positions are not matching, I would have thought that the god of Origin had come here personally. Interesting little guy. This level of order, power, and law is not weaker than when we first became primeval gods. Another young man in a green robe also looked at Yun Nuoxing and nodded. If it were not for the tide of chaos, I am afraid that you would have already ascended. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly at the side. He felt a little strange in his heart. It had been many years since he had heard the term little fellow. When a group of people in his soul heard this term, they could not help but laugh out loud, making him feel very embarrassed. Well, according to his current age, he was indeed a little fellow in front of this group of descendants of gods. Moreover, they were the original heavenly gods of the primeval beginning, so there was nothing to refute. By the way, can all of you return to the primeval realm now? Yin Nuoxing asked curiously. There was a trace of unrealistic hope in his heart that he did not dare to give himself hope, which made him directly say that. Well, no matter what, I've stood at that level before. The green-robed youth crossed his arms and muttered, "We can stay at that level for a short time with some means, but it is difficult to stay at that level for a long time, and the consequences are quite serious. We have indeed dropped in realms due to the destruction, cutting, and disappearance of the rules. It is difficult to return. 11 eras have passed, and we still can't find the way." They knew what Yin Nuoxing was asking, and the red-haired uncle did not hide it. Looking at it now, it seems that only the method of divinity carriers is more stable. However, we may not use this method and need to find another way. Why don't you try? We can't, but you should be able to. Although this method back then was a little strenuous and unrewarding, it is indeed stable. I have tried. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. The bitterness in his heart overflowed at the mention of this. Looking at their curious eyes, he replied, "I blew up the carrier and killed a primeval god. However, I almost died together with him. After that, the divinity carrier, well, that's what it is. So, I want to find a new way, but I can't find it no matter how hard I try." Jing Yun and the others said, "This is a little exciting." The green-robed youth said in a low voice, "Don't be impatient. This matter can't be rushed. We can only explore it bit by bit. But the world of order is facing some difficulties now. I urgently need the power of that realm. At the moment, there is only one primeval god in the world of order. It can't handle it." Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply and felt a little headache. Sometimes, there were things that he did not want to be anxious about. Instead, there was someone holding a knife to his back. If he did not hurry, he would be stabbed the next day. He secretly looked at the situation of the battle at the front line. His eyes flashed. The forces of non-order were displayed all over the starry sky. There was only endless energy bursting in sight. The forces of non-order were all old friends and old rivals. However, in the past, most of the time, he was facing the abyssal death shroud. Those guys were very powerful, but their brains were already fried. They would not hide anything during battle. There was no strategy. All the abyssal death shroud would only release a single message across the void. Kill, 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 kill. The situation in front of him was more or less the same. The only difference was that the black-robed people had intelligence. They could be considered as living beings. Although it was a little strange, he could not see what was going on under the black cloaks. He could not see their faces, and only a pair of hands were sticking out of their sleeves. Retracting his gaze, Yin Nuoxing looked at Jing Yun and the others and said, "That's why I help you guys out of my own selfishness. Although you guys have not been freed from the whirlpool of this war, and I shouldn't be saying these things, but, that's how it is. The world of order needs more power, and I'm looking for power all over the world. It's really one wave after another." Jing Yun couldn't help but sigh. The chaos of the past hasn't even been completely quelled, and now the world of order is in trouble again. If only the primeval god was still here. Yin Nuoxing had a strange expression on his face. Jing Yun then said, "However, we still need to stand our ground and support the world of order. We need to work harder to stay alert. Once this battle is over, you can tell us more about the world of order." Yin Nuoxing nodded. "Do you need my help? If it's me, I should be able to." He looked at the battle in front of him and said, "I should be able to guard a corner each. However, try not to let me get close to your people. It's easy for me to accidentally injure them." That's all. Everyone was speechless. What kind of accidentally injure was that? Indiscriminate attack. Why do I feel like this little guy is a little dangerous? He doesn't look as gentle and quiet as he does. It's probably just my imagination. After arranging a position, Yin Nuoxing quickly went to the corner near the flank. Jing Yun and the others curiously looked at his back as he left. After exchanging glances, Jing Yun couldn't help but ask, "What do you guys think? After all, he's the inheritor of the primeval god's power. He should be something. Let's see what kind of storm he can stir up." The red-haired man said, "I'm talking about the world of order, the outside world. Can't you just say it? Why did you suddenly ask us what we should think?" How would I know what we should think? The red-haired man was so angry that he rolled his eyes. A problem that can only be solved with the power of the primeval god? The green-robed young man scratched his head. This kind of thing was common to them. After all, in their era, when there were storms in the void, which part of it didn't require the power of the primeval god to deal with. It was just that they didn't expect the world of order to have such a degree of trouble after the tide of chaos. They thought that the situation outside would be similar to the situation after they were weakened. Anyway, let's take a look first. Let's solve the problem here first. After that, we'll go and see how troublesome the outside world is. This war that had lasted for 11 eras made Yun Nuashing very curious. There were many doubts in his heart. The conflict between order and chaos had existed since the beginning of the primeval realm, but he had never seen a place where the conflict could last for such a long time. Frankly speaking, he was a little interested in that group of dark creatures. If he could, he would capture a few of them back for research or something. Oh no, ever since he captured Bei Hao and that fledgling last time, his mind was now filled with thoughts of capturing a few non-orderly life forms and slicing them up for research. Perhaps it was because he had been fighting against the abyssal death mist for too long. Now that he saw groups of non-orderly life forms, he felt that it was either the underworld or the specter behind it. Judging from how long this battle had lasted, the latter was quite possible. Hopefully, it was just a meaningless association that was born when his mind was on a rampage. Standing at the right rear of the main force, Yun Nuashing was about to unleash his power when he suddenly saw a few warriors standing up straight and bowing to him. Then, they threw down an energy barrier and ran to other places to provide support. Yun Nuashing turned around and saw Jingyan giving him a thumbs up. He raised his hand and waved in response. "Girl, don't show mercy. Let's make a big scene." The little angel chuckled in response. Then, she felt that something was wrong and could not help but mutter, "No, it's just you unleashing your power one-sidedly. Why did you mention me?" Yun Nuashing said, "As my sub-soul, don't mind these details." With a soft shout, the array formation that had been accumulating power emerged from the void like a swarm of bees, stretching out for tens of thousands of kilometers. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried about hindering others, he had planned to pull everything within a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers into his attack range in one go. However, this was already enough to shock everyone present. At the very least, Jing Yun and the others were staring with their eyes wide open. Anyway, let's say hello first. The battlefield had already reached its climax because of the battle between the two sides. Now that he had come out of nowhere, it was just a matter of pouring a little water into the boiling pot of oil. Then, the entire battlefield erupted. Millions of magic circles were rooted on the ground, bursting out energy that was enough to shake the void and collapse the stars in the distance. The sudden appearance of an uninvited guest had thrown the other side into disarray, especially when he was unleashing his power on the battlefield almost unreasonably. He was like a child who appeared on the battlefield purely to unleash his power. He had instantly disrupted the other side's formation. A loud shout came from the group of black-robed people. Then, a considerable number of them changed their direction and began to charge towards Yun Nuashing. However, they soon realized their mistake. All the power that was charging towards Yun Nuashing would not last for more than a few seconds, even if they had a thick layer of defense. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. It was too late to correct their mistake now. However, they could not just ignore the mobile firepower that was unleashing his power recklessly. For a moment, there was panic in their formation. The other places that were engaged in fierce battles were also distracted, causing the warriors of order to swarm and wipe out a considerable number of them. Yun Nuashing exhaled softly. He lifted his foot and slowly walked forward. The millions of magic circles followed him and floated forward. As he gradually went deeper into the battlefield, the magic circles gradually expanded. The number of magic circles increased rapidly under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes. In less than a few seconds, the magic circles had doubled in size. There were even a few magic circles that spanned over 100,000 miles that were staring at the battlefield like a planet, causing both sides to shudder. Although I knew that there would be some unexpected results when this little fellow enters the battlefield. The red-haired man scratched his beard. He was stunned for a moment when he saw the scene before him being drowned in energy. He accidentally plucked out a strand of his beard. This combat power. Even a genuine primeval, heavenly god might not be able to achieve this. Who the hell is this little fellow? Such a wide area of energy attack, and all of them seem to be targeted at a specific area. Along with the rumbling energy, the power of order and the rules of this starry sky are rapidly being depleted. The stability of the barrier is beginning to decline. The green-robed young man's eyes flashed. He said to the person beside him, "Go and strengthen the defense of the barrier to prevent the power of order from pouring into this starry sky." Having said that, he continued the topic from before. I don't remember which primeval heavenly god had mastered such exaggerated attacks. Probably because they only inherited the energy. They did not inherit the power and divinity that belonged to them. Jingyun was also speculating. However, compared to that, he was more concerned about another thing. This little fellow is opening a path for us. If he joins the battle with his power, we can reduce the number of casualties. Well, although it's also for his own selfish reasons. It's understandable. However, the truth is unavoidable. The green-robed young man turned his head to look at the others. They shrugged and did not say anything. He looked back at Jingyun and the red-haired man. "So, let's go with this little fellow? Let's go and see what's going on in the world of order? That's possible. Besides, even if there's no such thing, if something big really happens in the world of order, are we going to just sit there and watch?" The red-haired man shrugged. "Don't tell me we're going to fight against the monsters of the chaos plane again. I'm a little paranoid. I need to rest for a while. These 11 eras have hit me so hard that my head is cracking." Everyone could not help but smile bitterly. Looking at the battlefield where they did not even have to do anything because of the support effect of the Temple of Origin, the situation became one-sided because of a certain violent maniac. They could not help but feel a little embarrassed, although he was from the realm of the gods. But this was a little too ridiculous. They had never seen anyone from the realm of the gods who could do such a miraculous thing. Shouldn't this battlefield be enough to leave it to him alone? While they were talking, Yin Nuashing had also successfully captured a few of the black-robed men and pushed them into the observer dimension. When the little angel, in his soul, sent a signal to him that everything was ready, all the magic circles suddenly stopped releasing energy. The accumulated energy turned into a huge barrier that covered the entire area behind him. Jing Yun and the warriors of the Realm of Order were stunned. Their power could still pass through the barrier, but what was the use of this barrier? "What's this for?" One of the warriors could not help but poke the transparent barrier. After analyzing that the barrier could still allow them to continue attacking, he could not help but feel puzzled. There shouldn't be a need for defense now, right? Chapter 1562. The vast power of order quaked, throwing the battlefield into chaos. Both sides were in disarray, and, simply put, it was as if the entire world had exploded. The personnel who were recording the battle at the back could only use that word to describe everything before their eyes. First, a circle of pure white order energy abruptly exploded, followed by an unending energy shockwave that formed a white energy sphere with a radius of at least 10,000 miles. The energy sphere drew in all the energies on the battlefield, including the residual energies after the energy collision for a second, third, and even fourth energy destruction reaction. As far as the eye could see, the pure white sphere of light was expanding wildly, followed by a tsunami-like energy shockwave gushing out endlessly from the center of the energy sphere. The tsunami destroyed the void, scattered the enemy's energy, while the sphere of light absorbed the energy that was torn apart, repeating the cycle and creating a chain reaction. In the end, the sphere of light expanded to a terrifying degree of 1 billion miles in radius, but the energy tsunami had already spread to millions of miles away. At the end of the recording, there was a tremor that shook the mountains. The personnel in charge of recording did not escape the indiscriminate energy shockwave. The group of primeval heavenly gods who were at the pinnacle of origin were blasted hundreds of miles away despite having sufficient power and the protection of the order energy barrier. That was the result that Jing Yun and the others only found out after they recovered from the shock. What the hell? If that little fellow did not erect that energy barrier of order recognition, we would probably be struggling to swim back in the void, wouldn't we? Jing Yun looked at the shattered battlefield and the densely packed cracks. A complete black planet had been blasted into fragments of meteorites and asteroids, and only a part of it was left, perhaps not even 1/10 of its original body. As for the larger part of its body, it had been completely vaporized after the energy bombardment. At the center of the explosion, apart from the fragments of the planet and some energy fragments that contained enormous energy that survived after sacrificing 90% of the body's volume and power, the rest was just empty space. They lay across the stars, so clear that they were like a drop of ink on a piece of white paper. How exciting! The red-haired man tidied his messy robes and could not help but sigh as he looked at the starry sky that was so clean that it was as if a black hole had ravaged it. The green-robed young man rubbed his chest and grimaced in pain. He felt a little pain in his chest. Since the energy shockwave did not end in one go, the energy shockwaves and energy shockwaves that erupted within 10 seconds were stronger than the previous one. Jing Yun had long slipped to the back to hide. After the first few energy shockwaves cleared the area, she was still fine, but her hair was blown back by the wind. Her own people, on the other hand, were sent flying backward like dominoes stacked on top of each other. Jing Yun, who was in a good condition at the beginning of the energy shockwave, was thrown over by a wave in the next second. She lost her elegance and blended into the crowd as she was sent flying backward. In the chaos, the two people he was holding were swept away by the wave. When he came back to his senses, he saw the green-robed young man rushing toward him at lightning speed. While he was still hesitating whether to block or fight, the green-robed young man's chest pressed against his face. He was a little dizzy and could not find his position in the void. The storm lasted for 10 seconds, and when they came back to their senses, they were already in a tragic state after the storm. 80% of the people were floating in space like floating corpses, unable to move. The remaining 20% had rolled themselves into a ball in the chaos just now. Now that the commotion had subsided, they raised their trembling heads and hurriedly pulled the floating corpses back. Jing Yun tilted her head and looked at the battlefield. Is this the power of the origin energy? No. I think it's more of the little one's power. The red-haired man and the green-robed young man waved their hands and said in unison. It was not as if they had never seen the origin energy before. Among the tens of thousands of people guarding this part of the sky, at least 20% of them had seen the origin god. Most of them had seen it at least once, and they might have even seen the movement and the scene of the battle. But they had never felt that the origin energy could erupt with such unreasonable power. This was the first time they had seen it. God knows what the little one was doing with the origin energy. Jing Yun patted her neck, which was tilted to the side, and muttered, I'm a little dizzy and have a headache. You hit me too hard just now. Report the situation. Regroup. Before the regrouping, get into a defensive position. Where's the little one? Immediately, someone came forward to report. Everyone is unharmed. That layer of energy shield has blocked out most of the destructive energy. We were not directly destroyed by the energy storm. However, after the storm passed, everyone was dizzy to varying degrees, and our minds were slightly shaken. Well, I've fought with those guys for so many years, and I've never seen such a funny situation. The red-haired man rolled his eyes. He saw that his robe was torn open, probably because he had hit something in the chaos just now. He simply tore his robe and destroyed it. Not many of the enemies were killed, and the little one had filtered out all the destructive energy. In the end, they were suffocated by the wind of the storm. The warriors around him could not help but smile bitterly. This was not something they could control. The wind was too strong, too strong. They could not withstand it all. As for the little one, cough, he's over there, right in the center of the battlefield. Everyone turned their gazes. After the explosion, there were only sporadic fragments of energy left in that space. On the whole, it was as empty as when the starry sky had just been born. It was just empty. From the hundreds of millions of miles in front of them to who knew how many light years behind them, it was a clean scene, leaving behind this big house in the starry sky. Everything inside had been wiped out and swept away. Even the ashes had been swept away. And in the middle of the big house, there was a pure white figure standing there. His hand was surging with energy that was more than 3 times stronger than when they first met, showing signs of falling into a berserk state. At this moment, he was touching the big sword in his hand and looking forward. After a while, the energy barrier behind him disintegrated, turning into layers of magic circles and scattering. It was completely scattered and cracked. Ripples appeared in the void, and more magic circles were integrated into the group of magic circles, increasing the range of this huge group of magic circles. In just a few moments, it had spread to a distance of 1,000,000 miles. The vast group of magic circles made everyone's mouth dry. Come, fight with me again. Yin Nuashing's soft and ethereal voice echoed quietly in the starry sky along with the power of rules. He held Frost in his arms, and a pair of beautiful, transparent, faintly discernible wings stretched out behind his back. Then, the ground that looked like it was made of a magic circle began to operate. Endless energy gathered toward the magic circle, and in the next second, countless energy burst out toward the distant starry sky, tearing space and nothingness apart. The surging energy impact exploded in the depths of the distant starry sky. I really think so. The red-haired man looked at the huge wall cast by magic circles and felt a little dry in his mouth. He swallowed hard and said, "Is this little guy raised by the gods of origin since he was young? I've never seen anyone who can use and release energy like this. This is beyond the realm of the heavenly god of origin, isn't it? Did this guy also fall from the realm of the heavenly god of primordial beginning? You should ask us." Jingyan rolled her eyes and carefully sensed for a moment. Then, she shook her head and said, "I can't sense any trace of him having once stood at the realm of the heavenly gods of origin. He is 100% heavenly god of origin, and at this level, this divinity, this rule should be very, very close to the realm of the heavenly gods of origin. He is only a little bit away from that realm, and his body has already accumulated a considerable amount of energy over a long period of time, which has already changed. Judging from his current situation, he is not too far off from being a true heavenly god of origin. The only difference is the problem of divine authority, rules, and order. The origin energy can make up for these, and he can still be considered a true heavenly god of origin. However, if he is allowed to ascend to that realm, there will be more drastic changes, the green-robed youth replied. Let's not talk about that for now. Get into formation. The battle continues. Press forward. Our friends have opened a path for us. Now, tear these bastards who have invaded the heavenly gods of origin's dignity to shreds. The roar directed at the warriors of the world of order, as well as the powerful burst of energy in the distance, combined with the combination of the two, caused everyone to roar in response. Their morale was greatly boosted, and they forgot that they were pushed back hundreds of miles by their own people and charged towards the front line like a pack of ferocious beasts. Cough, cough. Ouch, my head still hurts a little. Jing Yun forcefully cracked her neck and only managed to get it to return to its original position after a long while. Then, she shook her head and wailed before grinning and pointing to the front. Let's go as well. There's no need to command them in this situation. We just have to wait for them to do their job. Most importantly, if we don't do anything, the little one will finish everything that needs to be fought, and then we seniors will be looked down upon. The red-haired uncle and the green-robed youth looked at each other, rolled up their sleeves, and roared as they charged towards the front line. Instantly, another earth-shattering blast of energy erupted. Jingyan was one step slower. She turned back to look at the Temple of Origin, and her gaze suddenly trembled. The Temple of Origin, that was emitting a faint fluorescent light during the battle, was only releasing energy that was much more powerful than the energy of the ordinary world of order. The original energy of the Origin seemed to have deteriorated over time. It no longer had that special and sacred energy. However, after the storm just now, it now looked incomparably sacred, like a perfect silver plate in the night sky, incomparably holy. He felt that familiar energy, the energy that had disappeared for countless years, and tears welled up in his eyes. This little one can actually still activate the Origin energy? Jing Yun slowly walked towards the front line, her gaze sweeping over the ever-changing and ever-expanding wall of magic circles, and her gaze was filled with intense curiosity. "Who are you? You really make me curious." Yin Nuoxing, who was charging at the front line, suddenly shuddered. She looked around but saw nothing, and could not help but tilt her head. "What's going on?" "Huh?" The little angel was dazed for a moment, thinking that he had sensed something. Subconsciously, she spread out her soul and said in a low voice a moment later, "No energy or target worth paying attention to in a million light years nearby was detected." "What did you sense just now?" Yin Nuoxing scratched his head. "Nothing. It should be an illusion. I somehow felt that I was being watched by something." "Watched? Is it the Origin again?" Both of them fell silent for a moment. They looked at each other in their souls. One shivered so much that several layers of goosebumps appeared all over her body, while the other shivered so much that a piece of feather fell off. After that, both of them silently threw away this attention and focused all their attention on the battle ahead. They controlled the magic circles to release energy desperately, hoping to dispel the chill that had just surged into their hearts. A huge crack suddenly appeared at the center of a magic circle with a radius of 10,000 miles. The power of the void and nothingness gushed out from it. Then a thick cloud of energy continuously poured out from the crack. The other side of the crack seemed to be connected to a space, and the energy cloud was desperately pouring out. After the cloud of energy appeared, it quickly surged, condensed, and compressed. The energy contained within the cloud was pieced together and squeezed together. After a few hundred rounds of compression and condensation, it almost turned into a crystal-like energy cloud. After a delay of 2 seconds, it floated towards the battlefield ahead. A series of energy shock waves erupted from the cloud of energy, as if a heavy downpour was falling on a galaxy. And it was a downpour that contained the power of countless stars. Cloud of energy. Lord Feng, isn't this the twisted, Divine Shadow Clan's previous attack method? Jing Yuanji could not help but exclaim softly when she saw a few crystal clouds pouring out from the huge magic circle and filling the starry sky. I tried it before, but it's not quite the same as their twisted cloud of energy. I just borrowed their outer shell. As for the inner part is condensed into a solid magic circle group as the core. The main body is still connected to those magic circles. It's like a doppelganger of the magic circle. Yin Nuoxing laughed and explained, "I tried it before, but the effect wasn't very good and I didn't continue. I don't know why, but suddenly, the deduction in my soul suddenly found a point of compatibility, and then it was used." Hearing this, the little angel suddenly remembered something. "Did you go through some unknown transformation in that misty space just now?" Yin Nuoxing pondered, and his expression became a little solemn, a little awkward, and finally a little twisted. This is really possible. Previously, he had deduced so many things, but it did not take shape. And just now, the power of the Nihility primordial order had obviously changed. In the past, the impact of the energy gushing out would not have a situation where the power of the attack was getting higher and higher. One energy impact almost drained the energy out of his body. If he had not hurriedly extracted some energy from the backup world, he probably would not have been able to use such a powerful magic circle now. These two changes were completed suddenly, but during this period of time, he did not concentrate on studying it. In the past 100 million years, such changes did not happen. Recently, other than the source chaos, which was the strange space he went to through the cube 2 or 3 days ago, the source chaos had not evolved enough for him to change. As for the latter, he still remembered that his soul was inexplicably thrown into the misty energy, but he could not find where the energy went. Could it be that something had changed in the dark? Yun Nuoxing diverted a part of his attention to control and stabilize the formation. He pulled himself away and went to Jing Yun, who was fighting in another place hundreds of thousands of miles away. His sudden appearance gave the latter a shock. He used the staff in his hand to send the enemy in front of him back to their hometown. He let out a long sigh and asked, "What's wrong? Why did you suddenly come over?" "Oh, I have something to ask you." Yun Nuoxing tilted his head and looked at the endless enemies in front of him. He narrowed his eyes for a while and activated the magic circle to release an even larger energy storm and energy impact. Then he said, "What exactly is that energy cube that I touched a few days ago?" Jingyan still had time to think in the middle of the battle. When he heard the question, he organized his words for a moment and replied, "It is the trump card of every sanctum of origins. It carries the power of the Empyrean god of origins. It is not the origin energy, but a direct attack power that belongs to them. However, after the tide of chaos, it was abandoned and could not be used. It also hindered the defenses of the sanctum, which was why I asked you to remove it that day. Was it a gift from the Empyrean god of origins? Whether it was a gift or not, I don't know." Yin Nuoxing scratched his head and explained the situation that he could not determine. This time, Jingyan did not even pay attention to the battle. After listening to Yin Nuoxing's words, he could not help muttering, "Listening to your situation, it is a little like the energy thing that the Empyrean god of origins and the others had mentioned. However, that part of the memory has become very vague, the hindrance of the chaos tide. Energy thing, huh?" Yin Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. However, there was still no change in the origin energy. He also could not control the origin energy better. Apart from the power of destruction that belonged to the Empyrean god of destruction, the other origin energy did not show a greater degree of intimacy. Both sides were still at the level of getting along, and it had been many years since they had reached that stage. Boom! The energy cloud released a bolt of lightning that was like a river of stars. The energy that far exceeded the speed of light left a bifurcated scorch mark in the starry sky ahead. It tore dozens of lightning-shaped cracks that were hundreds of thousands of feet wide in the dense formation of the black-robed weirdos. The energy of the people who were close to the cracks began to boil, and colorful sparks appeared on their bodies. Those who were not able to extinguish the sparks in time were instantly blown up and dissipated. Buzz! A gorgeous beam of energy suddenly shot out from the enemy's formation into the sky, turning into a vast energy rain that poured down from the starry sky. The white energy rain that filled the starry sky reflected the shocked and confused faces of countless people. Yin Nuoxing and Jingyun were still deep in thought. At this moment, they were also stunned by the sudden burst of energy rain. "Report the situation." "Who died?" "It's not someone from our side. It suddenly appeared from the enemy's formation." Yin Nuoxing, Jing Yun, and the others all widened their eyes when they heard this. These black-robed weirdos possessed intelligence and a weak but strange life force. Just based on these 2 points alone, they should be considered some kind of life form. However, their strange energy and the energy rain that would not appear after they died, which was the result of the death of a god, made them think that these weirdos were strange energy creations that had obtained intelligence by chance. However, at this moment, that light rain seemed to be the beginning of a new wave. Vast energy light rain suddenly blossomed from the enemy's formation one after another, causing everyone's expression to freeze. They had been fighting here for 11 eras, but they still felt a chill in their hearts. What exactly were they fighting against, and who were they fighting against? Chapter 1563. The vast space battlefield fell into an eerie silence due to the sudden burst of energy rain. Jing Yun and the others stared in confusion at the group of black-cloaked weirdos on the enemy side. Their souls scanned the enemy side several tens of thousands of times, but they did not find anything out of the ordinary. They could not figure out the reason for this even after a long time. Even their attacks had slowed down for quite a while. Boom! It was only when a massive energy torrent rushed across the stars and wiped out the enemy before them along with a rain of light that they abruptly came to their senses. They saw Yin Nuoxing carrying a little girl in his arms and charging out with a nether void sword, and only then did they order their troops to continue attacking. This is a battle between order and chaos. Yin Nuoxing's voice quietly came. He knew that it was not appropriate for him to say those words to the primeval heavenly gods, but seeing them stunned for a moment, he felt that it was necessary to mention it. No matter what they were in the past, they are now the enemies of order. As long as you stand on the opposite side, and choose to stand on the opposite side, there is only one result. Jing Yun held the staff in his hand and smiled bitterly. They were taught a lesson by the juniors. Of course, they knew that. After living for so many years and experiencing the most tragic war in the most glorious era, how could they not understand this principle? However, after fighting for 11 eras, they could not help but be stunned for a moment when they suddenly saw such a situation. Aside from being stunned, they were also curious about what the enemy was. At this moment, it seemed that they could no longer deal with them as pure chaos energy creations. Thinking about that was one thing. Just like what Yin Nuoxing said, it was still the time of the war between order and chaos. It was useless to think too much about it. Everyone no longer held back any power in their hands. Those who were slightly injured and were hiding at the back of the camp once again roared and rushed to the front line, cooperating with their teammates to kill the enemy. There were a few groups of people who circled around and surrounded the army of the black-robed man from the side, leaving the main battlefield to Yin Nuoxing. Nobody dared to enter his battlefield. That was an indiscriminate energy impact. Every energy impact that poured out contained energy that made everyone tremble in fear. If someone accidentally entered his area of effect, although they would immediately be covered with a layer of order energy barrier, after seeing his fighting style, nobody dared to rush into his battle rashly. The enemy would have a cerebral hemorrhage if they saw it, and the allies would have a myocardial infarction if they saw it. Together, both sides fought fearfully, but no one could do anything about that killer weapon. They could only let him unleash his power wantonly, and then ponder about when he would exhaust his energy. My energy? Yin Nuoxing paused for a moment when Jing Yun asked about his energy capacity. After a moment, he replied, "If you want to talk about total energy, I have just used up half of it. Don't worry, unless a heavenly god of the primordial beginning appears, I have a way to fight until the end of time." What a joke. It would be nonsense if he had to exhaust his energy to fight a battle of this level. The battle at the front line of the void had lasted for 100 million years, and the duration would probably be many times longer in the future. To deal with a battle of that level, it would be impossible to do so without the determination to fight in the void until the end of the grand primordial realm. Once the battle began, there would be no time for rest. They could only fight, and fight until one side fell, or one side could not hold on and retreated, or they would face the great void samsara and perish together. There was almost no such thing as stopping to rest. After a few bursts of energy light rain, there were no more changes on the enemy's side. There is no phenomenon of a heavenly god falling because of the death of a black-robed freak. There are also no more energy anomalies. The sudden change that occurred just now was like a flash in the pan. After that, everything returned to calm, calmly mixed with their own power in the never-ending battle between order and chaos. They had also inflicted heavy damage to the warriors of order, but most of them were annihilated under the power of Yin Nuoxing and order. Not even ashes were left behind. Yin Nuoxing suddenly stopped the battle in his hands for a moment. He turned his head and looked at Jing Yun. "How much longer until we arrive? I can feel a strange energy aura. Is it coming soon?" Jing Yun panted and looked up. He looked at the dense black waves and cast his eyes to the distance behind. He could vaguely see a jagged object lying across the starry sky, exuding a disgusting aura of non-order. He could not help but frown. Almost there. Just hold on a little longer, and we will reach the dimensional fissure. It's just that the battle there is the most deadly. Yin Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief and squinted his eyes. These enemies, the black-robed freaks, did not seem to have much power. They were almost as strong as the distorted spawns that the distorted race had created back then. The only difference was that the former had inexplicably gained spiritual intelligence. However, this spiritual intelligence was not enough to allow them to perform any special defensive or offensive means. They were even weaker than the abyssal death mist spawns that had their brains muddled. Well, it was probably because there were too many of the abyssal death mist spawns. Although the black-robe freaks were also numerous, they obviously did not reach that level. Yin Nuashing raised his hand, and a magic circle floated forward. Suddenly, the magic circle spread out from the top. The aura that carried the power of the stars and the power of order descended from the sky. Along with the weak power of origin, the aura landed on this huge battlefield, suppressing the chaotic energy in this area. The power of order was raised to the limit. The battle that was already one-sided now seemed to have encountered a huge force that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. The power of the enemy was quickly fading away. The dimensional fissure, Yin Nuashing rubbed his forehead. At this moment, the battle line had been pushed to a relatively close distance. He could observe the situation of the fissure across the starry sky. He could not help but sigh. It's not enough to fight our way through. We still have to fight our way in. There's a huge amount of chaotic energy in there. If we don't deal with a part of it, we won't be able to close it from the outside. There's no other way. We can only fight our way in. Jingyan waved his hand and shouted back. Release all the power of the sanctum of origins. Charge in one breath. Boom! Like a thunderbolt in the clear sky, a sudden clap of thunder in broad daylight suddenly exploded on the battlefield. The dull sound seemed to have detonated a huge amount of energy that had been condensed to the size of a planet. Violent tremors occurred in the entire starry sky at the same time. It was like a huge earthquake. Yin Nuashing and the others quickly turned their heads. They could only feel a huge amount of energy coming from the front. There was an invisible storm that blew the energy, the power of order, and so on in this part of the starry sky behind them. Right in front of them, a huge galaxy covered the entire starry sky. It was as if someone was standing on the world barrier and had cut a crack in the world barrier with a single slash of a sword. At the same time, the crack was fixed on the world barrier. Therefore, the entire interior of the world could see such a huge scar. It was really a fissure that stretched across the entire starry sky. A spatial fissure. Yin Nuashing pointed forward. That was not some galaxy river. The huge energy reaction that had erupted earlier had come from that spatial fissure. It was vast and mighty. At this moment, it was still emitting a dazzling light. It was as if all the stars in the entire starry sky had gathered. It was so bright and abnormally dazzling, and the light was slightly distorted. No one knew what had happened to that spatial fissure. After experiencing a burst of energy, it suddenly expanded countless times, becoming a fissure that could be seen by the entire starry sky. Where the jagged fissure was, the surrounding starry sky showed signs of distortion and collapse. It was as if that fissure was swallowing the entire starry sky. Report what happened, Jing Yunyun shouted. She quickly found the red-haired uncle and the green-robed youth who were fighting elsewhere. Yin Nuashing stood where he was and looked at the fissure in the distant starry sky. His slightly narrowed eyes gradually turned dark red and then back to silver white. Then they became as deep as two pitch-black abysses. As he mobilized all kinds of energy and even used the Book of Epics or other means that he could use, his expression became more and more solemn. He could not analyze the situation of that spatial fissure at all. Now, he could neither feel its order nor its energy reaction. It was like a painting stuck in the starry sky, just a decoration. However, The feeling in his sight and soul was real. It was definitely a fissure that existed in the starry sky. It was just that some unobservable change had happened, causing his senses to deviate from his cognition. There was no way to analyze it. Although I don't know what it is, it's definitely not good. Jing Yuanji murmured. She whispered in Yun Nuoxing's soul. The surrounding space, this starry sky, seems to have disappeared. I can't feel any trace of the existence of space. Hearing this, Min also nodded and replied, It's the same for the void. My connection with the void has been forcibly cut off. Ge Zhongming and the others also spoke. Everyone's situation was similar. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment and felt something. It was not that there was a problem with the connection between their energy and the outside world, but that there was something wrong with the outside itself. They could not connect with other energies other than their own. It was the same for him. The void, nothingness, order, rules, all of these energies had closed the door to him. What he was facing was like a door that had been frozen for thousands of years. There was no way to break the ice on it, no way to open the door and reconnect the connection. That's the fissure of the primordial realm. Jing Yunyun walked from the side with a solemn expression. The words that came out of her mouth stunned Yin Nuoxing. A cornered dog will jump over the wall and run away instead of fighting? Which primordial realm does that crack lead to? Hearing this, Jing Yunyun quickly shook her head. No, it's not the primordial realm channel that leads to other primordial realms. That's a crack in the primordial realm. It's a crack that opens up inside the 8 primordial realms, but there's no way to determine where it leads to. Maybe it's the order void, maybe it's the chaos void, anywhere is possible. When it's forcibly opened, there will be a huge energy disturbance in this void region. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing frowned. Then forcibly break it apart and close the door. It can't be closed. Jing Yunyun's tone was a little anxious and unhappy. As she quickly mobilized the team, she said to Yin Nuoxing, From the looks of it, you don't seem to know much about the crack in the primordial realm. It's a method created by the Origin Heavenly God and the others to travel randomly in the primordial realm. It's full of randomness, but its biggest feature is that it's difficult to interrupt. In other words, it's used for escape. The opening of the crack in the primordial realm requires a huge amount of energy, and judging from the scale of the crack in the primordial realm before us, they might have been preparing for many days. They might have started cutting off their tail to survive the day we start our counterattack. They know how big of a threat the reactivated Origin Temple is to them. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. The Origin Heavenly God, it's them again. Why are the things they come up with always so untimely? Random teleportation in the void? If this group of things were thrown out and landed in the order void, they would at most bring disaster to a small area of the void. Just mobilizing a portion of the void's frontline forces to suppress them would suffice. Anyway, the void's frontline couldn't fight right now. If they landed in the underworld, the two sides would probably hit it off and attack the void's frontline together. These two were so black that they were emitting black smoke, and it was obvious that they were up to no good. If they were together, it would be even more over. Taking a closer look, when the spatial crack turned into the crack in the primordial realm, the black-robed people stopped attacking them and turned to use their bodies as a barrier to block the huge crack in the primordial realm. Jing Yunyun and the others also stood in a group, a little stunned for a moment. Yin Nuoxing raised her head slightly and narrowed her eyes. You want to run? And you want to run at the smallest price? Dream on. Boom. The deafening sound of thunder caused the starry sky, which had just stopped shaking, to tremble violently again. Two types of pure black and pure silver-white energy suddenly burst out from the same place. The aura released by the combination of the two energies that stood at the peak of their respective order caused a huge crack to appear in the starry sky. Yin Nuoxing's body released an endless amount of energy. Her half-body was silver-white, and her long hair seemed to be surging with black fog. This evil scene caused both sides to be stunned. All the sentient beings had a bad feeling in their hearts. It was as if they were facing a demon god that crawled out of hell, burning with extremely holy and extremely dark energy. Fight! Continue to fight. This is the reason why we came here. Yin Nuoxing's face was slightly distorted as she roared. Two types of energy entwined around her body, and she flew through the starry sky like a meteor. The array that spread behind her expanded crazily once again. The array disintegrated and reformed, and in a few breaths, it reformed into a mysterious character. The array that was dyed with two types of order energy burst out in the starry sky, and a violent aura that was enough to cause the void to fall into chaos. That energy, the red-haired uncle was so shocked that he almost vomited. That dark energy, he definitely didn't recognize it wrongly. That energy, how could he bear the power of origin and that energy at the same time? It was simply a fantasy story. Don't panic. 11 eras have already passed. God knows what has happened outside. It's not surprising that so many things happen in this world. The green-robed youth patted him on the shoulder and said calmly, I believe in his identity as someone from the realm of the gods. I believe in his power of origin, and I believe in what he's doing right now. So I can believe in him. As for what that energy is, we'll have plenty of time to talk about it later. Jingyan nodded with a serious expression. That's right. Those were things that should be discussed later. The most important thing now was to find a way to stop the crack in the primordial realm before it completely stabilized and could be used by them, or they could kill all of them right here and now. Once they were all wiped out, they wouldn't have to worry about the crack in the primordial realm anymore. Time. There are still 3 hours left. At most, 4 hours and 10 minutes. Jing Yun's eyes revealed an ominous glint as he spat out a scorching breath from his mouth. With a roar, he charged forward together with the red-haired youth. After being stunned for a moment, the army also roared loudly as they launched their final charge at the enemy. Dragging the hundreds of millions of soldiers with him, he rampaged through the tide formed by the black-robed people. In the blink of an eye, he had killed his way tens of thousands of miles away. Wherever he stood, there were countless enemies coming at him from all directions. They were using their deaths to slow him down and use all their strength to prevent him from getting close to the crack in the primordial realm. The sound of hundreds of millions of arrays roaring and the sound of energy destruction reverberated throughout the entire starry sky. Yin Nuoxing stuffed frost into the space for temporary recuperation. With one hand holding the Netherworld Ruin sword, he swept through the enemy army. With the other hand, he meticulously controlled all the movements of the arrays, including every energy bombardment. He looked at the crack in the primordial realm that was flickering slowly in the distance. His silver-white and pitch-black eyes narrowed slightly. Before he could look at it for more than a few seconds, the crack in the army that he had torn open was once again filled up within 2 to 3 seconds. Scram! With a roar, Yin Nuoxing stabbed the Netherworld Ruin's sword into the void. The two mixed energies of order turned into two energy torrents, one above and one below. They collided fiercely with him as the center, condensing into a huge ball of chaotic energy that was tens of thousands of feet wide. The two violent, mixed energies of order swept through the entire starry sky like an endless tide. All the black-robed people who bore the brunt of it were shocked. Before they could stop in time, they were sent flying by the impact of the mixed energies of order. Then they were swatted into the void by the waves behind them, and pressed into the void by the waves behind them to be wantonly destroyed. The origin, chaos, lasted for only 5 seconds before it stopped. Yin Nuoxing pulled out the Netherworld Ruin sword, and the starry sky in front of him was swept clean. His body shot forward like a black and white meteor. The array of arrays arranged in divine runes split into 3 or 4 arrays, guarding all directions. A hurried roar suddenly came from the crack of the primordial realm, and Yin Nuoxing was stunned when he heard it. After the words, which he could not understand at all, the black-robed people who were standing further away from the impact of the mixed energies of order and were annihilated instantly came back to life. When they saw Yin Nuoxing rapidly approaching the crack of the primordial realm, they rushed toward him like crazy. Some of the black-robed people who were standing further away were the enemy troops who were fighting fiercely with Jing Yun and the others at the back, all turned to look at Yun Nuoxing's position. They gave up on fighting the enemy in front of them and rushed toward him like hungry wolves. What's going on? The red-haired uncle, who was holding a scepter, could not help but be stunned when he saw the sudden mobilization of troops. The little guy is putting a lot of pressure on them. That mixed energies of order just now. Speaking of the impact just now, Jing Yun felt a wave of fear and trepidation. Even if they were at their peak, they would definitely not feel good if they were hit by that attack. After a moment, he suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly rushed forward. Stop them. Don't let them pass. You're in the way. Get lost. Once again, the enemy troops who were rushing toward him fearlessly from all directions made Yun Nuoxing a little angry. In an instant, he threw Huey's warning to the back of his mind. 2 silver-white and 2 pure black magic arrays suddenly appeared, and he threw them to the 4 corners in an instant. They faced him from a distance of 10 feet away, and he once again half-knelt on the ground and stabbed his sword into the void. Origin chaos. The void turned into a sea, and suddenly, a monstrous energy burst out from the sea and set off a huge wave the size of a star. The endless waves of destruction, mixed with the impact of order, smashed the entire starry sky into the void with the power to break open the void. In an instant, the scene changed, and Jing Yun and the others really saw the void. They hurriedly prepared to resist the impact of the void, but in an instant, the scene changed back again. The mixed energies of order that burst out continuously for 20 seconds made Yun Nuoxing's body tremble. He forcibly pulled out the Netherworld Ruin Sword and was about to rush to the side of the crack when suddenly a huge figure rushed out from the void and blocked his way. Blue veins popped out on his forehead, and the Netherworld Ruin Sword tore the figure into pieces. It's not over. It's gone. Don't go over there. Come back quickly. A horrified shout reached Yun Nuoxing's ears, and he was slightly stunned. The starry sky in front of him suddenly flickered with hundreds of waves of light and shadow, blocking his vision. Countless distorted energies were rapidly falling toward the crack of the primordial realm, and a huge energy turbulence caused his heart to skip a beat. In an instant, he thought and made a decision. He grabbed the hilt of the Netherworld Ruin Sword and threw it out like a spear with a roar. With a wave of his hand, all the magic arrays were aimed at the crack of the primordial realm. Creation of the void. Chaos falling stars. Chapter 1564. As the saying goes, when a man is about to die. Wait a minute. Why would he think of being half dead? Could it be because he was feeling a little weak and could not sense anything? Speaking of which, where was this place? He could not feel anything clearly. It was a strange, empty space where only specks of light and shadows intertwined. Everything was the same from top to bottom, left to right, and there was nothing new. It was boundless and without an end, as if he had plunged into a sea. Speaking of the sea, he felt as if he was floating on the sea. Had he entered a state of collapse? When was the last time he encountered such a situation? Come to think of it, it was when he was pressed to the ground and tortured to death by the Origin energy essence. It was quite a long time ago, and he could not remember the last time. He had wandered this world as an energy life form for a long time. The heavily wounded state of an energy life form was the same as that of a physical life form. The latter might be lying on the ground, groaning, shuddering, and making sounds, but for them, their bodies might have become transparent and their brightness weakened, allowing others to see through their bodies to see the scene behind them. Their entire being would become a transparent mirror, and if it was a little more serious, they would enter a state of collapse. What was his situation now? It was as if only his consciousness existed, as if his soul and body had left his body. He was barely conscious and thought that he had completely collapsed, but after a little struggle, he could still perform some basic actions such as breathing, blinking, moving his fingers, and the like. However, he could not feel any feedback from his body, as if the connection between his consciousness and his body was unilaterally blocked. While he was not completely collapsing, It should be a more serious state of collapse. Still, he did not feel any feedback from his body, which he did not know if it existed or not, and he felt that his body was cold. But then again, where was this place? What was he doing? What happened just now? Yin Nuoxing's wandering consciousness came to life with a slow shiver. He began to carefully observe the situation around him. The light spots and the black shadows were arranged in a crisscrossing manner. It was like someone who tried to reproduce the dream scene after waking up from a dream. But no matter how hard he tried, he could only remember a chaotic scene. He had to reproduce it according to his feelings. In other words, there was no pattern and no characteristics. He could not tell what those light spots and black shadows were for a while. With his weak, wandering consciousness, it was better not to touch the light spots and black shadows that covered the entire vision. Yin Nuoxing tried to move and raised his hand again, but there was still no feedback. After floating around and confirming that he was really only a ball of consciousness, Yin Nuoxing gave up on tormenting the body that he could not contact for the time being and wandered in this gray space. When he saw the gray scene, he thought that he had returned to the space of origin, but that space was completely different from what he saw now. There were no specks of light and shadows that filled his vision, and to say that it was foggy, well, it was more like his consciousness was too weak, as if he was looking at the world through a layer of dust. So, where was this, the space of consciousness? It was obvious that it was a low-level space that allowed the consciousness to move freely, but he could not tell where it was. Was it a low-level space of consciousness that came with the void itself, or was it a space of consciousness created by something that he had unconsciously entered? Or, well, after thinking about it seriously, there was a tearing feeling in the depths of his consciousness. He had used too much energy just now, so much so that even a slightly complicated thought action in his current weak state would affect his wounds. Since he could not think about that for the time being, then he should be able to recall what had happened just now. What was the last scene in his memory again? It seemed to be a white light, and there were black shadows that occupied most of his field of vision, charging at him fearlessly. The entire starry sky collapsed and fell toward the blinding white light. Oh, right. His memory was clear now. In the end, he grabbed the netherworld ruin sword and threw it into the primordial realm crack with a spear. Then he unleashed all of his energy in one go and smashed it into the primordial realm crack together with the carnival's enhanced celebratory version of the guide of all things into the primordial realm crack. Throughout the entire process, he kept charging at the primordial realm crack. He could not remember what happened after that, but something might have happened. He did not expect that one day his charge would turn into a charge, and he should have bumped into something, and then he was gone. He did not know what the result was. According to Jing Yun and the others, the primordial realm crack was an unbreakable thing created by the heavenly god of origin. At the cost of this magical effect, the result was a little random. But theory was theory. The essence of a netherworld ruin sword was to cut off everything, and it had the power to cut off order, rules, and so on, supplemented by the 70 or 80 types of origin energy that he had just smashed into it. As long as the rules and power of the rules surpassed the primordial realm crack, it could theoretically be destroyed. Then what happened? He did not know. He did not see the result before he was gone. He vaguely felt that something must have happened in the primordial realm crack, and the blinding light illuminated his figure and cast a shadow that was hundreds of thousands of miles long. He was gone. This time, he was really gone. He could not remember what happened at that time no matter how hard he tried. If he tried to remember, he would be fabricating reality. So what happened after that? Why was he here? Why was he only left with a consciousness? Where did his body go? Where were Jing Yuanji and Siyu? Were Jing Yun and the others cleaning up the mess or doing something else? Why had no one come to save him yet? How long was he going to float in this empty and lifeless place? Someone had to come and save him. Phew! What a long sigh. Is anyone there? Is there a god? Even if there's a ghost, it's fine. Yin Nuoxing's consciousness shouted in this strange space. The ball of consciousness lit up, but there was no reply. After sorting out his messy thoughts, he broke out in a cold sweat as he realized that this was not a simple state of collapse. Instead, it was a state of collapse, and his consciousness had disappeared. At this moment, his consciousness had floated out. He did not even know where he had floated to. He was all alone and lost in this godforsaken space. Although he definitely would not die, lost consciousness. Haha, he finally experienced what it was like to be lost consciousness. In the past, he had only seen other people's consciousnesses being lost, but he did not know what it felt like to experience it himself. By the way, if there was no one on the original body's side to guide him or call him, he might have to stay in this strange space of consciousness for a long time before he could leave. He would definitely wake up. As for when he would wake up, that would depend on his luck. So was his body still there? If it was not, then it would be really troublesome. In a state of complete collapse, it would take him a long time to climb out of the bottom-level space and reconstruct his body. This was equivalent to being not completely dead, a vegetative person of material life, and then being exiled to the bottom-level space of consciousness. He had to reflect on his mistakes and think about how he had died in such a pathetic manner. That's not right. Even if the primordial Tao realm crack had a huge amount of energy, it should not have caused him to be like this. Could it be that most of the injuries were caused by his own energy? If that was the case, then it was really not fun. He had used the energy of more than 10 worlds at once. In addition, he had used more than 60 hours of mastery of origin energy and more than 10 types of origin energy that he had just come into contact with. When he suffered a slight backlash, he was blown into a state of collapse by the explosion caused by the collision of a lot of energy. If even his consciousness was lost, we would probably sing about this embarrassing battle record for millions of eras in the divine realm when he returned. He tried to establish contact with this space, but there was no response. He tried to establish contact with Jing Yuanji and the others, but there was no response. He tried to establish contact with the divine realm from head to toe, from his body to his consciousness, but there was no response. It's over. Have I been completely exiled? Yin Nuoxing could not help but smile bitterly. He only felt a little haggard. His state of mind was the coolness and loneliness of winter. The north wind was blowing, and the snowflakes were floating. Yin Nuoxing shook his consciousness and threw away all the terrible thoughts. He took a deep breath. Oh, there was no response. He looked at the space in front of him like a ball. After thinking for a while, he swayed and floated forward. It was not that he had never been exiled from such a serious injury, but the bottom-level space of consciousness that he had been exiled from was not the same as the space he was seeing now. In fact, it was completely different. In the past, those spaces were like the void, and the void, dark and swarthy. There was nothing but emptiness and emptiness. It was no different from a confinement room that had been closed and tried to face the wall. It was a place for people to reflect on why they had become like this. After a period of reflection, they would be able to revive with full health and continue to court death. However, the space in front of him was foggy. It felt like it was filled with flowing lights and vibrant colors. After removing the light spots and shadows in the background, he could finally see clearly. It seemed like a layer of energy clouds. There was also a layer of clouds above, but the clouds above were filled with the colors of the starry sky, while the clouds below were flowing with the brilliance of all the energy in the world. With so many colors, it did not seem like an ordinary bottom-level space of consciousness. Banish, banish, Yin Nuoxing sighed in a haggard state of mind. He originally wanted to use the weak power of his consciousness to explore this space, but as soon as he used his power, he felt a heart-piercing, heart-wrenching pain, causing him to quickly stop. He always felt that he had not suffered any serious injuries, and only when the pain woke him up did he wake up. He tried to contact the others many times but did not get any response. However, he still felt some things that made him feel relieved. Jing Yuanji and the others were fine. The soul seed. Although he could not sense those things clearly, they did exist. It was just that he was too weak to contact them now. Before he launched the final charge, he should have thrown all the girls back to Jing Yuanji to take care of them. That way, he would not have to worry so much. In the abnormal space, the light spots and shadows gradually change from the initial square shape to many different shapes. However, they were all huge objects that flowed in this space, and without exception, they all floated in the direction he was going. After he woke up, his consciousness could receive more information and could also sense the changes and differences in the surrounding environment. Some things had actually happened, but if he did not notice it, he would not be able to feel it. When he first woke up, he saw that the light spots and shadows were static images. Now, they were moving in one direction. Even if he stopped, they would continue to move forward. He did not know where they were going. Yin Nuoxing had no impression of the huge light spots and shadows. He could not remember which level of space he had seen them in. Therefore, he felt that this should be a space of consciousness created by something or someone. However, he could not find any trace of someone deliberately changing or leaving behind. It was as if someone had just created this space and then became a shopkeeper who did not care about anything. He also did not have the intention to tidy up the space and let the space of consciousness develop as it would. The further he went, the more complicated the space became. The light spots and shadows went from being independent of each other to slowly sticking to each other. Then, the two merged into one and floated forward. Now, there was a faint distortion. The things that were relatively normal earlier, huge squares, dodecahedrons, sea urchins, a pentagram, a hexagram, and then slowly a ball. Then, they gradually turned into some strange things, some strange races, some tattered waste, and some large object that looked like they were pieced together by a pile of garbage. They also turned into planets and stars, but they were all fragmented. It seemed that the deeper he went into this space, the more distorted and chaotic the space became. Perhaps it was the influence of the rules and energy here. He could not feel it and did not dare to say anything. Exit. Yin Nuoxing wandered aimlessly in the sea like a sardine stray from its school. Suddenly, he found that there was a white hole in front of him. He seemed to be close to the top of the waterfall, and a suction force was pulling him and the surrounding scenery outside. The half-distorted light spots and shadows around him were also accelerating toward the white hole in the distance. He struggled to resist, but nothing happened. After thinking for a while, he simply hid behind a group of light spots and shadows that did not look so distorted and poured into the white hole together with the waterfall. When he was close to the hole, he saw tens of millions of light spots and shadows in front and behind him. They seemed to be gradually solidifying and no longer changing. It felt like they had turned from illusion to reality and rushed out of the white hole together with the water current. Splash! The sound of the waterfall pouring out of the cave and hitting the rocks rang in his ears. Yin Nuoxing broke away from the materialized light spots and shadows with the force of the impact. He did not come into contact with them and leaped out of the water current with all his might. When he looked ahead, he could not help but be stunned. It was a starry sky, a brilliant starry sky. In the depths of the distant starry sky, there were countless nebulas and large stars that were still active. Brilliant starlight filled the entire starry sky as if it had ignited this dark land. Fourth rank. Am I still in the war ruins? Yin Nuoxing murmured. He could not help but let out a small sigh of relief when he sensed that this was a fourth-rank area. It seemed that he had not been thrown far away and was still in the war ruins. It was just that he had never seen such a peaceful fourth-rank area. After arriving at the war ruins, apart from the first space that he saw, which was considered peaceful, there were still some areas where there were conflicts of order. Other than that, the other fourth-rank areas that he saw were either chaotic or strangely peaceful. He really had never seen a place that was completely peaceful like this. Behind him was a white hole with a radius of only about 10,000 feet. The hole made of energy rippled and shimmered with a faint light. The spherical hole was pouring out the solidified light spots and shadows into this starry sky like garbage. No matter how big the space on the other end appeared, they all shrunk to the size of 10 feet within 5 seconds after they came out. They then floated quietly in the starry sky and were pushed to other places in the starry sky by the light spots and shadows that surged out from behind. Yun Nuoxing's consciousness turned into a ball of light and pondered quietly for a moment. He sensed the order and rule power in this space and first created a temporary body for himself. However, after creating it, he felt that his body was a little unnatural. He then touched a mirror and looked into himself. He was stunned for a moment. The right half of his body was covered by purplish-black energy. The entire right side of his body was covered by purplish-black energy. As for his face, only 1/3 of his right face was covered. The purplish-black energy also had some light patterns and some inexplicable runes. Although he couldn't understand what was going on, he was sure that it wasn't intentional. Something might have happened on the side of his main body that affected this side. However, what exactly is going on? Yin Nuoxing touched the right side of his pretty face with his hand. When his palm touched the area covered by the purplish-black energy, he didn't feel anything. He could faintly feel that it was the aura of the void. This vague expression made his heart skip a beat. Thousands of scenarios flashed through his mind in an instant. In the end, all of them ended with a bitter smile. He didn't even know where he was now. God knew how to go back. However, his consciousness had already connected with his original body. His original body was indeed still alive, but there was a slight accident. Little Angel and Jing Yuanji were looking after his body. It was indeed very strange. He was still alive, but his body was passively moved. In short, he had already connected with his original body. His consciousness should be able to return soon. Now, Yin Nuoxing turned his gaze to the starry sky. While the return was still channeling, he should take a look at this strange place first. Chapter 1565. It was an ordinary starry sky. Billions of stars were shining brightly, and a vast nebula glowed brightly. If not for the fact that he was a 4th rank, he would not have noticed anything unusual about this place. Yin Nuoxing did not find any distorted or disordered energy, nor did he find any traces of order conflict. The 4th rank had completely taken root and calmed down. Currently, he did not find any remnants of divine power or traces of destruction. He was not sure if this starry sky had been so thoroughly destroyed that there was not even a residue left, and it was only rebuilt afterward, or if this place had not been disturbed by the war at all. Instead of bypassing the restriction to use soul communication, he directly used his reconstructed body here. Using soul communication, it seemed that he could not receive any information, nor could he sense the existence of others. Perhaps, even if this place was also a war site, it was buried too deep to sense anything. Speaking of which, this place could not be the deepest part of the war site, could it? The 4th rank was completely calm, and there were no traces of other orders in the entire place. Although it was not the same as what he had speculated, perhaps the deepest part should have been like this. The place where the 4th rank first appeared might have been the place where it was completely transformed first. After trying to think about some complicated things, Yin Nuoxing felt a stabbing pain in his head again. The purplish-black energy on his body seemed to have expanded a little. The sudden energy release and energy explosion from before did not give him time to leave behind any defensive measures. Now that he had urgently created a body made of energy to suppress the process of collapse, he could still maintain basic mobility. However, once he thought about some random things, he could feel that his entire spirit was unstable and collapsing. It would probably take quite some time for him to recover. As for how long it would take, it was hard to say. He would only know when he returned to his original body. In any case, he would not be able to fully recover without 4 or 5 days. At first, he thought that flying around in this starry sky might. Perhaps he could find something interesting. He did not expect that the guy who came knocking on his door and blew it up was actually bored. After flying around in the starry sky for more than 10 minutes, he felt that he could not hold it in any longer. The loading bar for return was almost up. Now, he should be able to return to his original body with a leap. It would take about half an hour for him to return naturally. As for why he did not return immediately, it was naturally because he wanted to look for something in this strange, calm, starry sky. However, after searching for a long time, he could only find something called boring. The starry sky remained silent. The starlight that was billions of light years away shone in his eyes, reflecting a splendid image of the starry sky. The celestial body that floated in this starry sky and spat out gorgeous flames looked a little lonely. Perhaps it was because the fourth rank was completely silent, but Yun Nuashing felt that this was not a portrait engraved by rule-bending power and rule-bending fragments. Instead, it was a starry sky that had been reconstructed by the fourth rank and possessed a normal physical body. Just like the other worlds, although there were gorgeous flames in all directions, it was very, very empty and still. Is there nothing interesting? Sensing that there were less than 10 minutes left before his return, Yun Nuashing suddenly stopped in front of a cluster of stars. He crossed his arms and sighed helplessly. After flying around this starry sky for half an hour, nothing happened at all. Could it be that his troublesome physique had finally reached the point where it did not work? But this starry sky is really big. Looking out into the starry sky, his gaze naturally did not just stop at the starry sky. Instead, he saw the void, the spatial barriers, and many other things at a glance. However, even so, it was still difficult for him to touch the boundary of the real world where he was at this time. The space seemed to extend endlessly as he continued to explore. Before he knew it, this space had expanded to the size of 3 light clusters because of his observation. He could not see the boundary, so naturally, he could not find a way to leave this space. It was as if he was trapped in the ocean, and he was an isolated island on the sea. He was surrounded by the same place in all directions, and he did not know where to go to leave this space. Therefore, he was just trying his luck by wandering around aimlessly in the starry sky. He wanted to see if his troublesome physique was as strong as before, and see if he could find any trouble. Now, it seemed that the physique that the great Yuan realms had decided upon had its limits. He did not believe that the last 7 minutes would give him any trouble. Yun Nuashing had just erected a flag in his heart when his senses suddenly captured a faintly discernible energy movement. He shuddered and turned his head stiffly. In the silent starry sky, billions of stars gathered in his black pupils. He could not see anything as far as his eyes could see. However, at this time, he still attributed this inexplicable feeling to an illusion or something. He felt that the heavenly god of origin would open the coffin and throw him into the coffin to find someone to carry him away. Due to the lack of time, Yun Nuashing only waited quietly in the starry sky for a minute. When he did not sense any repeated energy reaction, he headed toward the place where he vaguely sensed the energy release at the beginning. He crossed the distance measured in units of hundreds of thousands of light years with one step, and he was not afraid of overdoing it. The short-lived energy reaction seemed to have come from the depths of this starry sky. Although the starry sky was dazzling, most of it was still very empty, especially the starry regions that had existed since the earliest times. It was the hotbed of stars that had burned out, and there was the energy and light left behind when countless stars fell. It was also very empty. Walking out of the bustling starry sky into this uninhabited street, Yun Nuashing stopped to sense the energy. In this part of the starry sky, the only thing worth his attention was a very obscure energy source. Judging from the presence, it was indeed the thing that suddenly released a faint reaction that caught his attention. However, it was very weak, so weak that it was almost impossible for it to reach the starry sky where he was just now. The distance between the two locations was almost 2/3 of a planetary system. Yun Nuashing could not think of any good explanation for this and could only attribute it to coincidence. For example, something strange happened during the process of this energy spreading out, or something happened during the process of spreading out, and in the end, he coincidentally encountered it. Of course, it was more likely that his physique came into play again, and he forcibly grabbed this weak energy that could not last for long from the depths of the starry sky, forcibly attracting his attention, and then forcibly bringing him here. But what is there here? Everywhere he looked, there was no nebula, star cluster, or vortex. With desolation as the main theme, it was so quiet that even the stars did not make any sound. This was the wasteland of the starry sky. Since the end of the last destruction, there were few new stars that set foot in this domain that have fallen into silence for a long time. It seems that it will be difficult to find anything even if I continue to go deeper. Yin Nuoxing looked around and finally looked down at his temporary body. His palm was already faintly transparent and was about to disappear into the starry sky. It's almost time. At least let me see what the energy source is. Whether I can find the starry sky or not is still a matter of luck. Yun Nuoxing cast his gaze forward, and a moment later, his figure flashed and rushed toward the deepest part of the empty domain. The light of the distant stars was like a river that rapidly receded from his side. When his consciousness was about to return, he once again felt that faintly discernible flicker of energy. He adjusted his direction one last time, and before his consciousness completely disappeared, he discovered that energy source that was vaguely emitting energy in the depths of the starry sky that was still some distance away. A ball. That was it. He could not see more clearly, but he could vaguely see that there seemed to be something in the middle of the ball, and it was emitting faint energy in all directions. Before he could see it clearly, his consciousness was forcibly dragged back by his body. Before he left, he hastily left a mark of his consciousness, and did not know if he could still sense where the mark was across an unknown number of dimensions. In the next instant, countless stars flickered, and the starry sky trembled violently at an unprecedented frequency. Large sways of frenzied and distorted starlight rushed towards his eyes, whistling as they brushed past him. The starry sky became a distorted oil painting. Yin Nuoxing watched as his temporary body turned into a part of the torrent and was pushed back by the scene, reliving the experience he had when he came here. Not only that, he also seemed to feel the scene of all things in the world fading from his eyes. The vast starry sky suddenly collapsed, leaving only wreckage. And in the wreckage, there was a black ball, and in the ball, there was a rhombus-shaped object that was spinning at a moderate pace. By the time he reacted, it was all over. As he closed his eyes, hundreds of millions of stars were destroyed. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a ceiling that was 5 or 6 meters away from him, with a heavy aura of time, magnificent and sacred. It was like a dream, and at this moment, he was just waking up from it. Yin Nuoxing rubbed his slightly tearing head and slowly sat up from bed. The last scene he saw kept repeating in his mind. That black ball, that diamond-shaped object that only had half of it. However, no matter how hard he tried to recall, it was difficult to make the things that he didn't see clearly clearer. Even in his repeated recollections, that scene was gradually showing signs of blurring, causing him to quickly stop the scene that was playing on a loop in his mind. It was really like a dream. The more he tried to recall, the more he couldn't think clearly. Her long hair was silvery white, and Yin Nuoxing knew that it was because the little angel was fused with him. He turned his head and saw Frost lying next to him, head-to-head with him at a right angle. She did this twice. If it was not intentional, it could only be said that the girl had a bad sleeping posture. After searching his mind for a while, he realized that the group of girls, Gazhoming, and the others were not there. Only the little purple soul was lying in the middle of the bed in the garden, motionless. Yin Nuoxing's eyes suddenly froze when he lifted the blanket and saw his hand. His right hand. He suddenly remembered the strange appearance of the body that his consciousness had temporarily created. It also appeared in his real body. Something must have happened. You're awake. The soft voice of the little angel suddenly sounded in the depths of his mind. After a yawn, she continued, after your consciousness left, your body was in a state where no one could control it, and it collapsed naturally. I took over for you, but after stabilizing your body, for some reason, there was a phenomenon of void erosion. Void erosion. Yin Nuashing looked at the entire right side of his body that was covered by void energy, and then touched the half of his right face that was covered by the purple-black energy, which made it look a little hideous. He was also stunned, and it's not light. Even your soul has been eroded. It's hard to imagine that at this level, you would be eroded by the void because of an injury. For the time being, I helped you to stabilize your situation. Jing Yuanji and Min are helping you to find a solution, but with the methods they know, it seems that they can only help me to prevent the spread of the void erosion. They can't make this state disappear. Yin Nuashing mumbled in response. He also felt suspicious. In the past, he had been seriously injured so many times, but he had never seen the void take advantage of his illness to kill him. Taking advantage of his weakness to loot a burning house. Why did he encounter it this time? Was it because he blew up the crack in the primordial realm? Or was it because he accidentally came into contact with something when he blew up this part of the void? By the way, to what extent has the void erosion reached? Has it begun to affect my soul and body? Yin Nuashing asked. About this, the tone of the little angel became a little strange. After a while, she organized her words and slowly said, "It doesn't affect you at all." Yin Nuashing was stunned. The effect of the void erosion has already manifested in your body and soul. I've been maintaining the fusion with you, but I didn't find any place that was affected or changed by the void. It's as if the power of the void only occupies that piece of land, as if it's just occupying a pit. It doesn't intend to do anything in a short period of time, and it's very stable and difficult to remove. This is also the reason why Jing Yuanji and Min Du are helpless. They don't know how to deal with it. After hearing this, Yin Nuashing pondered for a while. He got up and paced back and forth in the room. His soul and spirit went back and forth a few hundred times in his body. Indeed, he had not discovered that the inexplicable power of the void that had appeared in his body had an effect on him. Moreover, he did not feel any repulsion, as if that power was a part of his body that had spread out. Although I'm not very sure, looking at this situation, it seems that there's an obvious change in the evolution of the source chaos. Yin Nuashing felt that he should know how to control it. After trying back and forth for a while, he finally found a new weak connection in his soul. With just a slight touch, the void that had spread across half of his body suddenly extended to every corner of his body. The little angel looked at the result and could not help but exclaim. Just as she was about to protect his soul, the menacing void force suddenly disappeared. It retreated from the entire right side of his body to his right arm. In the end, it still covered his entire right arm. It looked like he was wearing a pair of purple-black long gloves. It's really evolved from the source chaos? But why did it have to be at that time? I'm not too sure about this. Maybe it's because the timing was just right, or maybe it's because I came into contact with some kind of power when I destroyed the crack in the primordial realm. For example, after the crack in the primordial realm was destroyed, a large amount of void force poured out. Then, the primordial chaos happened to capture it when it evolved to a certain stage and brought it in. After a series of processing, it became what you see now. Yin Nuashing waved his right hand that was wearing a long glove and felt a little awkward. Why do strange things keep appearing on my body? If it's not patterns, it's branding. Do you think that the characteristics on my body are not obvious enough? The little angel snickered. Then, she quickly put on a serious expression and asked seriously, "You can collect it, but can't you get rid of it? Like throwing it back into the void or something?" No. Yin Nuashing shook her head. When the source chaos evolved, it suddenly seized a bunch of void force. It should be preparing for the evolution later. If I throw it away now, it should forcibly cut off the evolution of the source chaos. Since I'm evolving on my own body, there's no way to put it anywhere else. I can only leave it here for now. Fortunately, although it looks awkward, it doesn't affect my movements. The power of the little angel enveloped him, making him feel a comforting and gentle feeling. He couldn't help but stop the thought of exploring and let the power drill in and out of his body to check. Her soft voice sounded in his mind. Just make sure that the void force isn't an accident. Are you okay? Although it was a situation where their souls were fused, She could only check on the surface or the relatively shallow areas close to the middle, as well as the deeper things. Because his existence was too special, those areas couldn't be checked. Fortunately, I've used up too much of my power, especially my spirit and soul. It seems that throwing out the energy of more than a dozen worlds and more than 80 or 90 types of origin force at the last moment was still too much of a hassle. Yin Nuoxing walked slowly in the room again, stretching her hands and feet. There was nothing wrong with her body. The real problem was the internal problem, but those were not too serious. She would be fine after a little time to recover. By the way, how are you guys? At that time, I drag you into the center of the explosion. Are you okay? We're fine. The power of the little angel rippled in his soul, and a slightly reproachful voice suddenly sounded. When someone rashly launched the attack, there was an imposing manner of wanting to destroy the other party's primordial realm crack. After throwing out all the attacks, you subconsciously protected the spiritual world with all your power. If Jing Yuanji and Min hadn't rushed out to block the frontal impact for you, you would still be lying on the bed. Yin Nuoxing. Subconscious, he knew it. How could a wise person like him not leave himself a way out after being rash? It turned out that he had subconsciously thrown his defense to other places. No wonder he was so embarrassed. Well, then what about the scattered memories in your mind? How do you deal with them? They're getting more and more blurry. If you don't save them, they will dissipate in the void. The little angel reminded Yin Nuoxing softly, which reminded her of the dream. First, he asked her to save them properly. Then, he remembered that he could go to Jing Yun and the others. They were found in the ruins of the war, so they should know a lot about it. As he thought about it, Yin Nuoxing's thoughts wandered to another place, and he couldn't help but smile like a fool. In this starry sky, this place that was completely preserved, since the primordial realm crack had been suppressed in the void, and there were no enemies left, could he use the netherworld ruins sword to write a big demolish? No, it should be a big shift in the starry sky. This was tens of thousands of primordial heavenly gods, a group of powerful fighting forces at the peak of the origin, and a living remnant from the mythological era. Everything they knew in their minds. Oh, they all receded together with the ebb of the tide of chaos. That was not the point. He was greedy for their people, not their... He was greedy for their power, not their knowledge. But, if possible, he still wanted to find Jing Yun and the others to understand the origin energy and the realm of the gods. If he accidentally got some answers, well, it was a little whimsical. Anyway, that was what it meant. I'm done. What are you thinking about again? Why are there so many fragmented memories popping up again? The little angel, who had just finished tidying up, turned around and saw the piles of fragmented memories. Her pretty face twitched. I'm thinking about demolishing, moving, and Kuan-Ming's abduction. Ahem. Yin Nuoxing coughed dryly, picked up Frost, and walked out of the Temple of Origin. Anyway, let's go and ask them first. What if it doesn't work out? Then we'll trick them. We'll think of a way to trick them. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.